live now.
All right, y'all. Welcome to All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. Y'all know if it is Friday, y'all know it's time for All Politics Are Local. So tonight we have some exciting guests. Of course, y'all know it's the new year. It's 2025. So we're going to talk about the year in review a little bit. We're also going to talk about some of the things that are upcoming. So we're going to give you the lineup, tell you who's going to be up first. And then we're going to have a young lady we're going to bring forward who's normally in the back on our show. She is a young lady who is a sophomore down at Howard University. What do they say? What's the AU? So or HU, right? So we're going to have her on, and we're going to talk about what that's like for her as we get the show started and bring our guests on. Who's up first, John? What are we doing first? You're muted.
The first person we have up is great. Regular guest on our show, LaKeesha Eure, Deputy Mayor of Public Safety. She will talk about the groundbreaking violence reduction work that Newark is actually leading the country in. She's going to highlight the end of the year report, which saw a historic decrease in murders, but a rise in domestic violence, right? This is should be a really interesting and really good show. And this conversation is a really good conversation because it'll highlight some of the really nationally groundbreaking work that Newark has done. The decrease in murders over time. I grew up in the 80s, Ed, you grew up same time. Newark was more violent than it's ever been in its history. And I know that we were thinking that, well, it can't get better. It's something that would only get worse. And when we see programs like this and we see a way of thinking about public safety and violence that does something that we really actually thought was inconceivable 10, 15, 20 years ago, and that is to massively decrease violence to the point where it hasn't been seen in 60 years, right? And as low as it was last year, it's lower now. And also just that conversation on domestic violence and what's feeding that, right? That the deputy mayor was, talked about how we're looking at issues of poverty with domestic violence and what the Shawnee Center and what other violence reduction programs have to say about that. That I think is going to be a really interesting discussion as well, because the way in which they look at how to deal with, treat, understand issues of violence, I think is groundbreaking. And I think I've learned a lot every time I've had her in these discussions. And I think we're going to learn a lot more as well in the next one. Then after that, we're going to have writer, journalist, independent writer, and journalist Thandisizwe Chimurenga. She's an independent journalist and author of No Doubt, The Murder of Oscar Grant, and Some of Us Are Brave, and also the author of Some of Us Are Brave. These are two really important works. One talking about what happened with Oscar Grant, and it's the murders of Oscar Grant. We'll ask her about the reason for that title. And the other is a series of conversations with women who were in the struggle and had to deal with various issues within the struggle, including violence, right? And violence at the hands of people who are supposed to be protecting or looking after them. So we have some groundbreaking stuff that's going on there. We will also have DJ. We also have our academic Kelly Harris, who is advertised from the University of Pennsylvania, won't be able to be here tonight, but we will have more lively discussion as well going forward. Then, of course, we end up with DJ Rhino in the State of Hip Hop, and that's going to be at 7:30. So we're going to have a good and lively show for you tonight.
Yep. So why don't we bring the young lady on, John, and let me talk to her. Let me see, what's her story and and why she's been in the background so long, and then let's talk about what's happening down at Howard these days.
Oh, right, cool. Because like she's actually been with us for 3 years, right?
Wow.
She's one of my former debaters. Was one of my former debaters all the way through COVID, and even when she was a junior or senior in high school, she would work behind the scenes in the show, and she'd help out and do some really cool things. She went away to Howard, and she still has done a lot of things behind the scenes, even up to this year. And we always said that, and I always said to her, you're going to be co-producing many segments for us, and by co-producing, not just behind the scenes, but you're going to be finding guests and being in front of the scenes, doing interviews, et cetera, as well. And so, welcome, and have that conversation. How are you?
I'm good. How are y'all?
So why don't we talk a little bit about first tell everybody where you're from?
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Masoma. I am a sophomore nursing major, legal communications minor from Newark, New Jersey at Howard University. And by way of Nigeria, so I'm Nigerian and I'm from Newark.
And how long have you been a student of Mr. Austin's? How about that?
I went to Science Park High School and I've been his student since 7th grade up to
Wow.
senior year.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you know Mr. Austin, huh?
Yeah.
A lot of years, you know. So I don't know if you know, but you know Jonathan has trained a lot of journalists along the way. Some got pretty big names. Do you know that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So he kind of lifted up his own horn a little bit, huh? Kind of blew it for you, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
So why don't you tell me about it? You know, it's funny because we used to do a magazine
Hmm.
back in the day that was called the College Entertainment Review, and we used
Okay.
to distribute that magazine on the campus of Howard University. This is when Puff, now Sean Diddy Combs, was a student on that campus, and
Hmm.
a lot of different students, and we had a number of students who used to write for the Hilltop,
Oh.
that were also writers with the magazine as well. So we had a great relationship with that student newspaper. We're going back now quite a few years. So, you know, if you think about Puffy's 55, and this was when he was 20. So we're talking about almost 30 some years ago, right?
Oh, wow.
So he wasn't even born at that time when we were, involved down there. So, and Howard was really known for some great things. Obviously, they was known for their law school. They were
Hmm.
known obviously for their medical school, and they were known for their parties, right? They were known for those homecomings and those parties. So I'm gonna let you talk about what is still some of the great things down there that you've had an opportunity to experience.
Okay. As my second year, there's a lot of things I would say that's really good about Howard. As like a hilltop writer, I think the first thing I noticed was like the environment and how everyone at Howard is like always doing their own thing. Like everyone at Howard is continuously succeeding. Like there's no one at Howard who isn't doing something, who doesn't have a summer internship. They don't have a summer internship where they're at home, they're working. Like people are consistently working at Howard, and the environment gives you the energy of like you see everyone else around you succeeding, so you have to succeed, you have to do something. So there's a level of like pushing other people to succeed to the level that they want to. The campus is engaging. Everyone is always doing something. When I talk to people who are interested in going to Howard, they tell me like, what's the one thing I like? There is something on the yard consistently every day. If it's no events, there's people on the yard playing music, throwing parties. There's a company or organization on campus. There's always something going on at Howard, and it gives like a lively setting, which is really nice to have. Um, Coming from high school, from like a predominantly white high school to now like a predominantly Black college, it's like the environment is like more welcoming. Everyone is like, in a way, because other students may say this is probably wrong, but everyone is welcoming in their own right. Like there's people who are really nice. Like everyone, there's its own individual group, so you'll never feel alone or you'll never feel isolated from Howard. As a hilltop writer and as like different things on campus, like the other thing I'm on campus is like the elections commission. So there's different things for people at Howard, and working for the Hilltop has helped me like realize that there's more to nursing than what I traditionally think there is. So there's different opportunities on campus that I really like.
So when you say that there's always something going on, does that, are we talking culturally something going on?
I can speak for like fall semester was like one of, because like from my freshman year there was like parties, there'd be like the random things happening, nothing more centered or more traditional or cultural. But now like for fall and like having Kamala come to campus, there's always something on campus. There's like for like there's companies like Pretty Little Things, which is a clothing brand. Like there's different clothing brands coming on campus. Thurgood Marshall coming on campus to give out scholarships. Business business companies coming to give out scholarships and internships. There's always something on campus. Like I'll be walking to class and there's like, I think there was like Shannon Sharp was on our campus.
Wow.
So it's like there's always random people just walking around. So
Wow. Just walking on campus, Shannon Sharp.
there was like I think it was like an NFL thing going. I don't watch football, so I had no idea what was going on, but it was like a college football thing where like they
Right.
were showing the games, and like it was all the commentators, Shannon Sharp, the other black man, I don't know their names, but
Oh, that's very cool. We have a deputy mayor. Welcome. We have our I guess our intern who is behind the scenes. Oh, she just dropped out. But I was going to introduce you to the deputy mayor for public safety. But we're going to come back. We'll continue talking about the conversation with Shannon Sharp, and I'll try to get her back
on. Yeah, there's like something always going on campus. And I think another thing about Howard is Howard made me realize how many people I have connections with. Because the one thing they'll tell you at Howard is like everyone, no matter who you meet, is going to take you somewhere that depending on where you want to go. And it's best to keep in contact with them. So going at Howard and like knowing people from Newark and like working at different places in the city has taught me that I met so many people that can take me places that I never thought that I would go. That's another thing that Howard is really good at. So
when you say working in the city, you mean working where, New York, or working in what?
Working in Newark. So since I was a freshman, since I was
Oh, well, we have the deputy mayor back. Deputy Mayor LaKeesha Eure, really glad and honored to have you on. We have Masoma Nwosu. Masoma is our wonderful intern, the person who has been behind the scenes for a couple of years. She is a sophomore at Howard University and an aspiring journalist, and you will see a lot more of her on our show. I always say that, and you share something in common. You are both Chargers, and LaKeesha Eure is a Science Park High School graduate, just like you, and we are always honored to have LaKeesha Eure on. She's a regular on our program.
awesome.
You've been. Oh, I'm sorry.
She can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now? LaKeesha Eure, can you hear me? Oh, I think you're frozen. Okay, so you're frozen. We'll take you out and put you back in. Hello? Deputy Mayor? Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello? Oh, are you able to hear me? All right, right now you're on mute and we're just having trouble getting you in the background. Your picture is coming up, but we can't hear you now. Can you hear us now? Okay, so we're going to take you out for a second. Actually, can you unmute yourself? Right now you're actually muted and you're frozen. All right, so we'll try again. All right, so continue the conversation.
To answer your question, I'm talking about like working in Newark. So my junior year up to I think this summer, I've been working for Newark Mentor, Thomas Owens, um, and working for Heritage Hall, which is like a museum for like
I think we
for
have. Nope, we don't have it. All right, so I'm sorry. Keep going.
for HBCUs and like having like a museum where students will come and intern there. So that's the jobs I've been like working and meeting different people like the mayor and people who work at presidential office and like the museum, different places. Oh, you're on mute.
And so you've interviewed people too, right, at the Hilltop. What describe some of the journalist stuff that you've done? I remember our debaters looking at some of the stuff that you were doing in real time, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, on the Hilltop," and they started quoting your name in one of their articles.
So as a first time journalist, it was like really hard to get to know like what to do as a journalist because I don't really write when it comes like outside of classrooms. I don't really write for like publications. So the people that I've been able to interview, which I find really cool, is like I know like the White House, Rodrika Applewhite. She's the director of the Black media for the White House, and she's connected me with so many people who work directly in the White House to interview them for things like I can tell you, Bill, like Kamala Harris and Joe Biden passed a bill for free reproductive contraceptives for low income communities, and being able to interview her for those like little bills that they passed that I have to write about.
So, so you say you don't write, or you do write?
This is my first time actually like writing. So fall semester is my first time actually writing for a publication. So anything I don't write outside of like like English assignments.
Okay. And so I want to get back to two things. One, first off, I want to so Newark Mentors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how did you get involved with that? Because I'm really interested in that.
Okay. So I was introduced to it by my vice principal at Science Park he's just the vice principal, and he introduced us to like so Mentor Newark came to Science and said that they had an internship or like a program for Science Park students, and I was told to sign up for it, and I did. It was Trillium, which is like a brokerage company, like a stock brokerage company, to teach students how to look at stocks, read stocks, and predict stocks, the market. And that was my internship for 2 months, for 2 years, from my junior to senior year. And my senior year, I was promoted to become the top intern. And then after graduating, I became then an intern at Heritage Hall, teaching students about like HBCU culture, everything about HBCUs, how to apply for college, how to pick the correct HBCU for you, things and research, and then becoming the program director last summer, and now continuing as a program director for Heritage Hall.
Wow, congratulations.
Oh,
You know,
thank you.
and but Newark Mentors, so it basically mentors young people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know
Yeah.
how long the program has been around?
I know the program started, probably wrong, but like 2014, 2015 by the Senator, what's his name? Cory Booker. And after Cory Booker, I think like once he became senator for New Jersey, he then passed down the CEO and placement and leadership placement to Thomas Owens, who's now the CEO for Mentor Newark.
You said Thomas Owens.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what might be a good thing is for you to invite Mr. Owens on the show and for you to
Okay.
interview since you elevated so high in the organization, became a director and all of that. So you know a lot about it. So you
Mm-hmm.
probably have a lot of really good questions you can ask him. So I think that might really be a cool interview, for you to do. And so we'll get back to that and see if we can put that together.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I think we have you here. Uh, Is your mic right now is muted? Uh, Deputy Mayor Eure, your mic is muted.
Can
And
we?
if that doesn't work, then we could try just coming in without a picture to see if you can hear us. So can you hear us? And you're also frozen again. All right, cool. You can continue while we try to solve this.
So I think that would be a really cool interview because I didn't know anything about Newark mentors, right? And particularly Mr. Owens. So I think that might be great if and that might be a great first segment for you to produce, right?
Yeah.
Invite Mr. Owens on, produce that segment, talk about what Newark Mentors is and not only the benefits that you got from it, but really, really be exciting. So that's one idea you can think about, and then talk with Mr. Austin about, and we talk about how to put that together. But I want to go back to the Shannon Sharps of the world who walk around your campus and all of that, and his podcast, right?
Yeah.
It's called the Shake Room or Shy Room.
You're asking the wrong person. I don't know. It's just something. It's just something.
It's something like that. But I know so when you see people walking around the campus like that, do students just walk up to them? Do they get a chance to talk to them, to ask questions, take pictures? People friendly. What is that like?
So there will be like for example, like SOB, School of Business, they like bring on different types of people from like CEOs, and then COFA, College of Fine Arts, they bring like artists. So like I think like Howard University like has its own department for Warner Brothers at Howard. So they bring in artists. Like I know they brought in like African Afrobeats artists. They brought in like Lucky Day, I think his name is, to meet students, and he'll walk around campus and just talk to students. When it's I know like when it's like the beginning of each semester, they'll bring in an artist to just like perform. And like for Spring Fest, I know I met Gunna and like different types of artists. And sometimes people just come on campus. I don't know if you know, there's like a New York drill rappers. I think their name is 41. Like Jen Cart. I don't think you know who those people are, but they're like famous people from New York who everyone knows from my generation. And they just randomly walked up on campus and just took pictures with students. Everyone is friendly. So I've never heard of someone saying like, oh my God, this celebrity or someone was rude to me. They just come on campus and take pictures with students.
And so, and Howard is an open campus. It's not a closed campus.
Yes, completely wide open. There's no gates whatsoever.
So folks can just walk on campus and just randomly start having conversations, or even set up some sort of speaker's booth and start having sort of conversation out there on campus.
I know like because Howard is open, it's like they still have security on campus, so there's no like someone can just randomly come on and like disturb the peace, but people can just walk on campus as long as like they're, I guess, quiet enough and not disturbing anyone.
Okay. You want to try it now, John? See if she's with us.
All right. Yeah, I'm just texting in the background. Deputy Mayor, can you hear us? You still can't hear what we're saying. And can you unmute yourself? All right. We will try. We'll try again. I'm going to take you, because if you can't hear us, can't mute yourself, and I'm going to take you out from behind, and then we'll talk about troubleshooting some more.
So the thing about Howard 30 years. Well, let me ask you this: have you ever visited the law school while you're there? Have you had a chance to go over there?
Surprisingly, no, I have not.
Okay. So the reason I ask you that question because Charles Hamilton Houston. So when are you back on campus now?
No, I'm home. I go back next week.
Okay. So when I'm gonna give you this name, Charles Hamilton Houston, right?
Okay.
So when you get back, I want you to go and when you get an opportunity, go to the law school and ask somebody who is Charles Hamilton Houston.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of black lawyers in this country, right, that became lawyers because of a gentleman who helped found that law school on that campus. And why most of us, myself included, all of us went to law school, right? It
Okay.
wanted to go to law school was because of a lawyer like Charles Hamilton Houston, right? You can Google him. He has an autobiography. It's an incredible autobiography. He talks about Howard Law School. So while you're there, you can take full advantage of all of that. And you know that our current mayor is a graduate of Howard University,
Yes,
right?
I know.
So is his brother. He's a graduate of Howard University. So
Mm-hmm.
you're right when you say that, that Howard's alumni are very close, right? And they do look out for each other. They do help each other get opportunities. So you are in a very fortunate situation at this very moment.
Yeah.
Um, but when I was asking you, culturally, what happens on campus, do they still invite speakers to come? Young, because when people like when people like Mayor Baraka was very young, when he was a student like you, 18, 19 years old,
Mm-hmm.
he was speaking on campuses like Howard University, going around and talking about the issues of his day. Does Howard still invite young 19, 20-year-old speakers to come? Have you seen that since you've been there?
Like from other colleges to come speak?
Well, from the community, that are involved culturally and say what's going on in the community. Do they or what kind of speakers, if they have any, like say for the holiday or anything like
Mm-hmm.
Black History Month? Do they have a list of events that are going to take place during Black History Month?
Yeah, we have events like Black History Month, for like different organizations do their own individual events. As for like Howard University as a whole, as an entity, I'm not completely sure. When it comes to speakers, um, no. Like I know what you're talking about because like there's been conversations around like when I work with Thomas Owens, we do have conversations like what happens back in the day with like HBCUs. No, not necessarily. I think like for some reason my generation is a little bit not that like we're activists, but like not in like the realms of like how your generation was when it comes to that. We don't really I think everything I don't know how to explain it without saying something wrong.
Well, don't
I think
worry about
every
it.
Don't worry about it. You can call us old.
no, no,
I mean, don't
I'm
worry. We are significantly
no.
older.
I think
We're not offended by it. Like,
no, I'm not saying I think like Howard is like more of like I think everyone is trying to watch what they say in my generation and what they do and the safety of like of everyone because Howard like I think when was my fall when Kamala Harris and everything everyone was like vocal about what Kamala Harris is doing and like there's different sides with like the whole Israel and Palestine thing and how Kamala Harris is handling it and whether they agree or not like there's been vocal aspects of those things but I think when it comes to having speakers on the yard and like stating their opinions and stuff it's a little bit shied upon from my perspective but no we don't have 19-year-olds and 20-year-olds talking on
So,
campus no
so what you're saying is that your generation is trying to be politically correct.
yeah 100%.
Wow. Okay. Our generation shook that up. Your mayor was your mayor was one of the prime shaker uppers
Oh
of
yeah,
all.
I know. I see them on campus. But I think like everyone is trying to make sure that they're like making everyone else uncomfortable, like making everyone else comfortable, like just making sure like everyone is like what you were saying, like politically correct, like saying the right things and not saying things that are like racist or anti-Black or homophobic or xenophobic, like all those things. Like everyone's trying to make sure like everyone is, because yes, I admire all the work that your generation has done when it comes to activism, but I think there's a little parts of like, how would I say, like there are parts where there seems to be like a disconnect with like how other people in other communities view what was going on, like if that makes sense. So I think like everyone is trying to be inclusive in the ways of like that they speak about different types of like controversial topics.
I'll leave it there for right now, but I want to pick up on that. So, Keisha, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
There you go. We got it now.
Oh, Jonathan just got excited.
Yes, I did. I was
Excitement.
texting you on behind the scenes. I was like, oh, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, welcome to All Politics Are Local, and you are a very frequent guest. We're trying to have you on even more often. Always an honor to have you here. You are like one of our frequent guests from the beginning of our program, like when you were with the Newark Anti-Violence Coalition, and we're always honored to have you. I've learned so much every time that you are on our show. You have dedicated a substantial part of your life to doing anti-violence and violence reduction work. I know that you didn't get the full introductions. Let me introduce you to one of our new co-hosts, and not really new as a co-host, but she's been behind the scenes on our program for many years. Masoma Nwosu. She is a sophomore at Howard University, and she has been working with us since she was at all three of our alma mater, Science High School. She has worked on the debate team since she was in the 7th grade, and she is now a sophomore at Howard. And welcome to the program. And it's great to meet other fellow alumni, just as a plug. Deputy Mayor LaKeesha Eure has been an inspiration for many years, and the groundbreaking work she has done is national in scope. There are people around the country studying what is going on in Newark. And she's here to talk to us about the end of the year report, but we're also going to ask her a lot about some of that work, how it's gone from being, and how it's expanded. When people were talking about defunding the police, Newark was doing things that were looking very forward in terms of putting social workers at play and looking at crime and violence as a public safety issue as opposed to a public health issue. Again, I'm not going to talk too long. I can talk all day, giving the deputy mayor her accolades, because she deserves all of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the work that she has done has literally saved hundreds and hundreds of lives, and people studying her and studying the work that she's done, both on a federal, state, and national level, right? Because she has been to the White House. The White House has taken the things that have been from Newark, and we've learned from others. Others have learned from us. But this is incredibly national in terms of reach, and we are honored to have you on. Welcome, Deputy Mayor LaKeesha Eure.
Thank you so much for having me. I think you said everything. There's no need for me to say anything. I think you've given it all. But we are here in 2025, and you are absolutely right. I think I've been doing this work now for 15, 16 years, since about 2008, 2009. And so this work has grown. It has evolved tremendously from the days of us being on the grounds and in the streets with Newark Anti-Violence Coalition. This year, we just celebrated 15 years of anti-violence in the city of Newark. We had a gala last month, and we ultimately gave out some awards and recognized some folks for the work that they've been doing. Before this was looked at as a model, before this was looked at as anything with funding, before it was structured and organized or even had anything attached, it was just the love of the people. It was just the passion of the people in the community at the center, ultimately saying that community is responsible for public safety, and we can police ourselves, and not relying on law enforcement to be able to police our neighborhoods or make our neighborhoods safe. And so during the days of Newark Anti-Violence Coalition, we had demands around wanting an active voice in public safety. We wanted to be able to choose our public safety people. We wanted Newarkers to have jobs because we understood that violence was about, some parts of it was about poverty and financial issues, and people were being robbed and things were happening because people didn't have means. And so we wanted people to have, jobs, and Newarkers to be able to be specifically prioritized in terms of having jobs versus having people here who don't live here, who work here, and the money goes back out of the city. We wanted employment. We wanted the homicide taught in the schools. So Black and brown people, Black and brown history taught in the schools, so that if people were taught who they were, they're less likely to commit crime and violence against people who look like them. We wanted the Bloods and the Crips to put their guns down around gang violence during those times. In 2008, 9, 10, those early days, we had over 100 homicides happening. And mainly it was being blamed on gang violence. But we ultimately, once we understood the data, we understood that that wasn't really it. But we wanted the gangs, the Bloods and Crips, to put their guns down. And then finally, we wanted violence declared a public health issue. And once you declare violence a public health issue, then you have to put resources to it. And so we were challenging systems to put some resources. So we was in the streets because a woman by the name of LaKeesha Eure was shot and killed. But before LaKeesha Eure, there was so many more people, but there was no outrage. And so we ultimately was putting the outrage and saying to people, we can't have this be business as usual. And so we began to form and organize because we were upset and outraged. And so we would go all over the city protesting and shutting down traffic around violence. Shooting, stabbings, robberies, anything that was happening to people. And because we understood that the shooters didn't care the weather conditions, we couldn't care the weather conditions either. And so we were showing up to support families and to assist. And so this is how our movement started. Mayor Raj J. Baraka wasn't the mayor at the time, and other people who are in position now were activists in the streets and who ultimately were community organizers. So we began to do this work. We began to crisscross the city. We began to shut down traffic in front of churches, in front of highways and byways. People were arrested for this work. And so this work is not just a passion work, but people sacrifice for this work. And so to see where it is now, as we fast forward through some of it, we begin to strategize and organize. And so Mayor Baraka, part of his platform to becoming a mayor was out in the streets with us. And once he became mayor, he said, when I become mayor, we become mayor. And some of us took that to heart. And some of us began to really, be more active in our communities. And so we declared violence a public health issue. That was probably 2014, 2016. I began to work for the city to help begin to pull together some of the violence prevention work. We didn't have any funding. We didn't have anything. I began to write grants to get some funding in. And so I wrote for about $2.5 million worth of grants for victims of services and to be able to start some of this work. During that time, we now have the Newark Community Street Team. We have Newark Street Academy. And so the mayor has his initiatives, but ultimately Newark Anti-Violence Coalition, we had SOS back in those days, before those days. We had Street Warriors. Now we have all these organizations doing work, but there's no coordination. So we wanted to coordinate it better. And so the Brick City Peace Collective, we have created in about 2015, maybe 2018. Newark Community Street Team is in 2015. 2018, the Brick City Peace Collective comes along to help with the coordination of all these organizations and community-based organizations. In 2020, the Office of Violence Prevention is created in the wake of the George Floyd around defunding of the police because of police brutality was happening all across the country. And so our version of defunding the police was reallocating 5% of the budget to create an Office of Violence Prevention to now house all of these, organizations and different things in a structure. They gave us the building on 17th Avenue, a police precinct. And so we transformed the precinct into a place of help and being able for people to get some help versus harm. So now transforming the culture, we're shifting the narrative. This is what we're doing. We now are, the police department's budget, we begin to hire social workers and outreach workers and victim advocates. People who've been victimized need a place to get help. And so we ultimately started to look at violence as a public health issue after something happens to someone. And even before that, how can they get some resources? Where can they go? And we ultimately realized that this helps us to be able to shift and stop retaliations from happening, where the victim becomes the perpetrator becomes the victim, and we have this cycle. How do we stop the cycle? How do we intervene in this cycle? How do we help people who have substance abuse issues get help? How do we help people with mental health issues get help? People who are angry, aggravated, frustrated, all sorts of things. Who do they go to? And so we begin to put this model in where it's really about healing the community, because we have had so much trauma in the city of Newark for 50, 60, 70 years, right? From our 67 rebellion coming even forward. And so there's been no healing work. So we really are looking to do healing work. And so we are starting to be shifted. For every 10 police that go into the police academy, we get to hire one social worker. And so to be able to do that and hire social workers, now we helping people deal with the root causes of what's going on. We recognize that we couldn't arrest our way out of this issue, that it wasn't a law enforcement issue. There's a community-based side to public safety, and ultimately being able to say, we don't need police to respond to everything. And police have a job to do, but community and practitioners and people who are professionals also have a job to do too. And sometimes, most times, and all the time, community knows what's going on. They know who did it, why it happened, what's going to happen next. And so really community needed to be at the center of this work and how we do it. So that's like the overview. But ultimately, this is how we get here. So at the end of the year, every year, we begin to do an end of the year review. And so I know in the city of Newark, when we had over 110 homicides, once we started the Office of Violence Prevention, we began to track this information and track data.
And just to be clear, when you first started this work, right, 13, 14 years ago, 110 homicides in the city of Newark wasn't, I'd like to say that wasn't the highest number, right? Like that was a number, but it wasn't like, what was that number, 110 homicides? When we started that work, what did we look at that number as?
I don't necessarily know what the numbers were, because we wasn't tracking. We didn't have any data driven minds, right? We were just being community, and we were just upset because 9 times out of 10, whoever was shot, stabbed, robbed, anything that happened, we were in proximity to it. Many of us knew the people. And so the perception, right, and what it really felt like probably was times 5. So I'm not really sure what the numbers were. I know the 110, 112 number, but also know, the numbers of where we are now.
Yeah, those numbers, Jonathan, was always in the hundreds.
Right.
And they didn't start coming down because, of course, the Newark Anti-Violence Organization, when it started under the mayor and some other folks, of course, that was their goal, to drive those numbers down, because under Cory Booker, those numbers were constantly elevating. And so, yeah, it was always in the hundreds. And their work primarily being done in the street was a direct effect, had a direct effect on those numbers going down. So, when you talk about the work that was done in all types of weather, I mean, it was heroic in and of itself, with people getting no pay, just doing it because they were concerned about the safety and health of the community.
And so as we, look at it and we fast forward and we come through it, we ultimately begin to now put some investment in the work, right? So you need funding, you need investment. And so for a long time, we didn't have any funding. And so we began to use our ARP dollars to be able to fund the work because we needed help. The
And what
city,
are ARP? What does ARP mean?
American Rescue Plan dollars, ultimately our COVID dollars, federal dollars. And so for public safety, they gave me $20 million under public safety, and I put approximately $16 million out into community over the past few years to be able to invest in trauma recovery work, safe passage at the schools to make sure the kids get back and forth to school safe, high risk intervention, which is where we're mediating incidents right in community, people who have personal issues, as we want to say, gang related issues or whatever it is, then there's a mediation and intervention that has to happen. We're doing therapeutic and clinical services. We funded over 25 youth mentoring organizations because there was an increase in youth violence taking place. So we needed to get a hold of mentoring these youth and having programming and employment for these youth, family services, victim services. When things happen to victims, we were able to work with them and do follow-up with them and get them resources. Domestic violence work. Domestic violence is up and has been up since COVID days. And so we now focusing in on domestic violence because we had over 500 aggravated assaults, and 50% of those aggravated assaults were domestic violence involved. A couple years ago when we had maybe last year, we finished the year 2023 with 48 homicides, and half of those homicides were domestic violence related.
Wow.
And then this year in 2024, we finished with 37 homicides. So we down another 20%. So as we track the last couple years, we had 52 homicides in 2022, 48 in 2023, 37 in 2024. So we're having a reduction, each year. And so the goal is for us to get to zero. And I'm sure people never thought we could get to 37 from 110 to now 37. That reduction is tremendous. And it took everybody, the school system, the hospital system, our college system, our government system, every system that we had, our justice involved system, our healthcare system, to be able to come together and community at the center to be able to really do this, to be able to really bring these numbers down.
And what you're talking about, right? Like you said something like public safety, public health before you made a distinction, right? Like as in it's a public health issue, but you're the deputy mayor of public safety. Talk to me about what those categories were and what that thinking is, right? Like as in how does this work? How does labeling it public safety or public health, how does that get everyone together?
So ultimately, we are addressing violence as a public health issue. So that's the approach. But the overall goal is for safety for the public, for public safety, overall. And so we are putting the public back in public safety. So there's not law enforcement led, right? It's community led. And so we are doing community-based public safety. And ultimately changing and shifting the narrative and shifting the culture and shifting the way that we view public safety. So public safety now begins to get trainings in trauma. We are able to now do things together. We did a trauma to trust training together with law enforcement and community where we're talking about trauma, collective trauma, generational trauma, historical trauma, right? Before we never talked about those things. Law enforcement have traumas that goes unaddressed, and community have trauma as well that's never talked about or even seen, and the humanity of it is not seen if it's criminalized. And so we have social workers in all of the police departments that now a social worker goes and check on a person who may get arrested and say, how are you doing? Is there anything that you need help with? How can I help? Right. And before they're not able to have those conversations. They're able to get resources on the way in and on the way out. It's offered to them. Before it was never offered to them. And so we're creating opportunities where we didn't have them before. We have students in college and we're paying tuition for them where they never would be able to have that opportunity because their parents are incarcerated. They've been a victim of violence and crime. They have low GPAs because of the environmental factors and the risk factors. But now we have 40 young people at St. Elizabeth University, 20 at Rutgers University that we are paying tuition for, right? So to see public safety dollars go towards something else versus incarceration, to see federal dollars go to something else and not punitive things, is how we're shifting the work that we're doing. The coordination that we have, we all meeting together at the table and we're talking about best practices, and we're bringing best practices. I get to go travel to other cities to see what they're doing and bring it back. And they get to see what we're doing and come visit, right? To be able to have cross collaboration. We never had that before. And people talking about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and being able to try innovative and creative things and being able to make mistakes. And it be okay to make mistakes. Law enforcement make mistakes all the time, and they budget continues to grow. So violence prevention, don't do something right, they shouldn't be, their funding shouldn't be jeopardized, because this is something new. We're figuring it out. There's no model, right? There are models now, but there was no blueprint, especially in the city of Newark. For the most part, I created the blueprint. Mayor Baraka and the rest of us, the Bashir Akinyelades and the Zaid Mohammeds and the Sharifa Minhoteps and, all of us that was willing to take risks, all the way down to our Donnas, our Kassan, folks that was willing to take the risk. And so that's really what it's about. And so the risk and the reward was certainly worth it, be able to build out this work that we're doing.
And the work that you're describing is both public and private, right? Like as in individuals in the community organized, but they also use government. Is it possible to do all this work at the scale that you're doing it and be as successful without government intervention, right? Without utilizing the money and the tools that you have for government?
I would say it would be difficult not to. It would be difficult if we didn't have government, if we didn't have that investment from government. But we ultimately know, too, that we need to figure out how to raise private foundation dollars or private dollars to be able to do this work, because the money, to be honest, is in jeopardy from the federal government because of this administrative change that we have. There's a federal office of violence prevention that was under Kamala Harris's office that is probably going to be zeroed out and not carried over and continued. So the people who worked in that office as of today are gone, right? And so, and now figuring out what's going to happen at the federal level with our violence prevention, not just the dollars, but with the office, because it has helped so many people nationally to be able to come up with best practices, trainings, to build out systems and all of those things. And so it's under not just scrutiny, it's under, I don't know what the word is, but it's at risk of being lost. Like all of the great work from the federal level, even down to our state office of violence prevention, because we're about to go through another election, right? Our governor is not going to be the governor anymore. And depending on who gets into this governor's seat decides how the work continues. And here in the city of Newark, right? So we're trying to make it sustainable so that no matter who's in the seat, it is in the general fund, and that it's in perpetuity, and that it has to be voted out by city council in order for any changes to happen. And that is not just administrative, and it can't just be, done away with. So we're really working hard for sustainability. How do we sustain this work? How do we sustain the funding? How do we sustain the credibility of it? Because it is working, and it has taken us some time to show the success of it. But because, based on politics, all politics are local, but based on politics, this thing changes. So at the federal office of violence prevention, state office of violence prevention, and now our local office of violence prevention, my job as the deputy mayor is to make sure that we put some policies in place, that we create a blueprint that we leave behind, and that we find some funding to be able to sustain it.
And so that is again, every time that you're on, I learn so much, right? Like Masoma, do you have any questions to ask?
No, I don't have questions.
Okay, so like when we're looking at when we're looking at what we're dealing with, what you're dealing with now in terms of the future, I like when you talked about sustainability, right? And I like when you talked about like the way in which you're implementing this to last, no matter who's in power, right? Whether it be public funding, private funding, a combination of both. It seems like all options are on the table. You would never say, I would never work with the federal government. Like if Trump offered money for the Office of Violence Prevention, you wouldn't be like, nah, we can't take that, right? Is that a fair assessment?
I would say that's a fair assessment because we work hard to get the money in the federal office. We worked hard to be able to come up with legislation and to make for testimonials for them to even understand. Biden is the only president that looked at violence prevention and to be able to put some funds. He put $5 billion into violence prevention work. We've never had that at the federal level before. And so it has been a huge, fight. It has been a huge, we had to show the Justice Department and all of, to show that this work works nationally. The numbers are down in terms of violent crimes and things like that. Nationally, the homicides are down nationally because we have violence interrupters. We have credible messengers. We have social workers. We have a system in place. We have strategies. We have trainings. And we are doing it collectively. We have conventions, we have all sorts of things. And so we've been really working hard to come up with to come up with federal like laws, regulations, policies, best practices, writing this stuff down, tracking the data, to be able to show that it works. And so I would say that we are ultimately all looking to pull together to make sure that we get some federal dollars, we get state dollars, private foundation dollars, and we learn how to fundraise on our own. But we really are looking to be able to change policy, but to be able to sustain the work. And because most times they see that it's Black and brown people that are affected by violence, that's what ultimately the data says. But we know that mass shootings, have been up in places. And so even to see the president be a victim of violence, right? He was shot at, right? And he should ultimately take a look at, you could have been a victim in a different way, right? Gun violence is not just, for Black and brown people and poor people communities, right? So gun violence affects everybody. Everyone can be, trauma affects everybody. And so we really should be looking at it more holistically, and from a place of real healing, where we can ultimately create safety in our communities from a better place.
I again I always learn a lot having you on, right? Even in the expansive way that you look at it, right, in terms of violence prevention and dealing with trauma. I learned that what the work that you're doing is also concerned with the trauma that everyone faces within society. You were concerned with the trauma that the police face within society, because you're like, the police face this trauma and they traumatize others, right?
Correct.
And that's been part,
people, certainly.
and that's been part of.
When it goes unresolved, when it goes unresolved, then, everybody, police bleed on other people, first responders, bleed on other people when their stuff is unresolved. And so for the first times, we're asking law enforcement, are you okay? Because we don't ask them, are you okay? We don't ask the first responder, are you okay? Because they're supposed to be okay all the time, right? And that's not even a real place. And so, yes, to your question.
And I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to have you focus on the thinking behind this problem of violence and domestic violence. I think you said last year half of the homicides before, like when you first started doing this work, the perception was like gang violence, and that was the major cause of violence. Now, when you're looking at like the numbers from last year, domestic violence was like close to, I think you said close to 50% of homicides. And when you're looking at the increase in in violence overall, right? You're talking about domestic violence. Can you talk to us about that, and how does violence prevention deal with that? Is it just more, and I'm just asking, is this we need more police, we need more police enforcement, or what would you say as deputy mayor, as someone who's done this violence prevention work, what is needed, what is being implemented in the face of this?
So we have the aggravated assaults are up. And the aggravated assaults ultimately are, when we look at them, domestic violence related. So that's intimate partner, that can be parents and their children, that can be, almost anything. So domestic violence runs the gamut. It's not just husbands and wives and girlfriends, it's not just intimate partners. And so we just need to take a look. We're now teasing it out and really looking at what's going on. The court systems have restraining orders against people that go unserved. We have restraining orders that get dropped, and then it turns out to be tragic. Sometimes people don't come to court, and so ultimately they are trying to allow this stuff to play out in our justice system and in the courts and with police and law enforcement, because domestic violence is very dangerous. One of the most dangerous, things. And so our special victims unit is investigating and doing the work. And sometimes time is not always on their side. And so what we're doing is we're having a more aggressive approach and a more systematic approach, the same way that we were able to have a rapid response team responding to our shooting incidents. It's the same way we need to have a domestic violence response team helping people in real life, versus just giving a referral and hoping that it works itself out, because that's not how it works. When we're trying to relocate people, we understand that there's a shortage in housing, and homelessness is huge in our community. It's a national issue. So where are people going to go when they don't feel safe? And most times people stay because they don't have anywhere to go. And so we're looking to find places to relocate people outside the city. So if the person lives in Newark, it may not be the best idea to relocate them in the same city where their victimization happened at. So we now have to find other places, that we can, help people relocate to. Some of our people are in housing or low income housing. They're not willing to give up their housing because it's low income, it's affordable, but they may not be safe for them to stay there. And so we have a few nuances around housing, relocation, safety. And so we're looking to come up with some innovation and creative ways to work with other developers to be able to have units in other places that's strictly designated for people who are domestic violence victims. And so ultimately trying to just find creative ways to help people. The children are in school systems or in school. They don't want to move the kids out to schools. So we're trying to just take away some of those barriers that where people don't want to leave or they stay in situations. And so we're investing more in domestic violence. We're being more intentional. The same, structure and strategy that we use to reduce shootings, we're going to use that now for domestic violence. More being in real-time notification, working with law enforcement, working with families, working with community, working with better resources, working with the housing authority, working with the justice system, our court systems. So really, again, the same strategy that we use to get our homicide numbers down, now we have to get these aggravated assaults and domestic violence numbers down. A more aggressive approach with real best practices, trained people, and resources.
And with the Shawnee Center, do we have many of these things in place, or is it just like the struggle before, finding new things to deal with things that might not seem that you find out, that you learn from
No,
this? What
we
is
are
one of the
going
things?
we're going to do, so Shawnee Baraka Center will be a focus. They've had some turnover and some administrative, issues. So we're going to, do better in terms of coordination with them. And we also understand that the batterers and the people who are the abusers need assistance too. So we're also going to find more intentional interventions for the batterers, for those people, because they need intervention as well. Most times we always help the women and children and the families and people who are victimized, but there are men who are victimized that don't report. There are men who need a safe haven and a place to go. They need a person to talk to. And so now we are going to put in something more intentional for men only, to make sure that they're trained in domestic violence, because men are going to these places to see women. And a lot of times the dynamic is off and they don't stay in the cycle of getting resources. So we're really looking at a lot of the root causes of why things are falling through the cracks, and what is causing, the root cause of what is causing these issues, and can we get to the root cause with the right people in place?
You said something that was like, okay, just there. I guess when you're doing the work on the ground, there are things that happen that might seem unexpected, that might seem like you go in with the thinking that domestic violence is going to look one way. And then when you actually do the work, it might look different or complicated. You said that, explain what you mean by the resources to men. It seems like from an outside perspective, it seems like if you commit domestic violence, then you need to go to jail. You need to be punished for it.
Right.
But like, are you suggesting that there needs to be a different way of thinking about domestic violence? You also mentioned that there are men who go to certain places needing resources and can't get them, or are trying to escape or trying to get out of a situation. And there are no resources.
Right.
I'm not sure. Like that
So
sounds.
there are not a lot of resources for men, right? We assume that men are always the batterers, are always the ones abusing, and that's not the case. But we don't have enough resources for batterers. We do have some for abusers, for them to be able to get assistance and help. And the judge mainly orders them for anger management and things like that. But it has to be a bit more robust than that. And so we are looking at it differently. We're working, towards, again, those same things, go to, if you know who you are, you're less likely to commit crime and violence against people who look like you. So if you have a sense of self-esteem, a sense of confidence, some self-worth, a way to take care of yourself, a life, support, all of those things, a sense of belonging, those things matter. And so if we implement those things and women have those things, then they're able to take care of themselves a little bit better and differently, and men. And so we're not saying that men are always the abusers, but I'm saying that men are the victims a lot of times, and they don't report it, and they don't get assistance, and they don't get help. And the resources are frustrating and sometimes take too long to get. So we're trying to create better resources, a place where they can go to get help in real time, people they can trust, somebody they can talk to, a real resource for food, clothing, shelter, transportation, right? Like real resources in real time, that's going to be efficient, and that's going to be impactful for us to be able to get into this cycle that's happening with aggravated assaults. We have a lot more stabbings that's happening, and robberies that are happening. So really just getting in front of these things so it doesn't spill out into street violence and gun violence later.
Thank you so much for coming on. I know we've kept you past the time that we said, and again, every time you were on here, I learned stuff that I didn't know before, and this is no different. I'm always learning from you, and it's an honor. Are there any other questions or follow-ups?
Thank you so much for having me on. What is it, Ed? What you got?
What I want to ask you though, Keisha, how are you doing? I mean, because I think this is a Herculean, lift for you. So how are you doing? I mean, this is a lot of work. This is a lot of love for our people, and and sometimes it could be really emotional and trying. So how are you doing?
It's a lot, and I'm tired, if I had to be honest, right? I'm tired, because it is all of the traumas. You internalize those things. You see a lot. I'm at the hospitals, I'm at the houses, I'm at the funerals, I'm at the meeting, I'm at, so a lot of those things you internalize. And so I'm working to better be able to release those things, to better take care of myself, to identify my own traumas, to be able to resolve some of my own stuff, and to heal. And so one of the things that I'm working on is a book. It's called Healing the Wounded Healer, right? Who helps to help? Because a lot of us on the front line being the help, and there's no help for us. So I'm writing a manual to how to heal and how to stay doing this work and how to take care of yourself. So I'm working on doing things at a level that's going to be able to help people in a bigger way, and help myself. So I'm okay. and it's day by day. 2025, I plan to release so much more of this work. I want to train up other people to do it. I want to be able to leave behind some of this legacy, leave behind some of this work, but I need to train more people in the work. So that's the goal, so that I'm not as tired.
You know, one of the things, just real quickly, Jonathan, that I text Tamika on often. You know, are you taking enough time though for yourself? Like, are you taking breaks? Are you able to get away? You know, that's the one thing I think. Even for men and women of God, it's important for them sometime to just take a break, go away, so that they can hear from the Holy Spirit and hear from God. Are you able to do that?
I am working on it. I'm building a team to be able to do that. But I've learned how to delegate it out more. But ultimately, I'm taking time for me. I am. I have some goals this year. Like I need to be able to build a family and start a family. So that's really what I want to do. So yes, I am taking time for me, not necessarily vacationing, but being able to just have some quiet time.
Yep. That's what we want to, because we need you, Keisha. But
Yeah.
Absolutely.
us, right? If you're not taking care of Keisha, right?
Absolutely.
Let's
So
make
I'm
sure.
putting my coat on so I can get out here and get back to the work. Tonight I am working.
Wow.
But I am grateful that you always have me on. I'm always happy to be able to share what's happening in the city. And ultimately, I'm going to do a end of the year review from a community-based side, and invite folks so that we can have a better dialogue and conversation. So it's not just a press conference for law enforcement and us for a quick, report out, but a real conversation to show the work. We funded over 50 organizations, and they did amazing work. And so I want to showcase the work that's been done.
Absolutely. I know we talked briefly before about just wanting to have you on with some of the people who are doing the work that you were doing, and we definitely want to do that.
Yep.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And good night. That is incredible, right? Like I always love having Deputy Mayor on. Um, uh, so we are also honored. This is Thandis, uh, Thandisizwe Chimurenga.
Yeah.
Is an incredible writer,
Thank you.
and incredible journalist. And actually, I brought you on because I wanted you to ask a question. If you had a question of the deputy mayor, because I know that you are in Los Angeles. One of the people that we work with here comes out of Los Angeles, because I know that when you're dealing with violence prevention and violence
LaKeesha
work.
Eure.
Yes,
Yes, good
and
brother.
he's here in Newark and has been doing some incredible work with the with the Office of Violence Prevention. And I know that you probably would have had some incredible questions as well, right? And we are honored to have you here today. You are an independent journalist. You are the author of No Doubt: The Murders of Oscar Grant, and also a more recent volume, Some of Us Are Brave, Volume 1, Interviews and Conversations with Sistas in Life Struggle. These are important works, right? Like, and when we're coming, I know Josie Gonsalves was also supposed to be on, but I know she has emergency, so we are with her. So, and we just want to give her a shout out and send her our love. And we are honored to have you today. This is 2025, right?
Yep.
We're going to ask you about some of the works you wrote, right? Like, so I just have some questions about just some of that too. So we want to make sure we highlight that.
Okay.
But we're talking about a writer's look at 2025, right? And when we can incorporate that into these questions as well. So first, when you're looking at one of the books that you wrote was called The Murders of Oscar Grant. Why does it murders and not murder?
So thank you all for having me. Shout out to Baba Zaid, wherever in the whirlwind he may be. Thank you so much for having me. So I started out doing radio news and print news around the same time. And when Oscar Grant was murdered, of course, we all here in California were glued to the news about the case. It was eventually decided that the trial would be moved to Los Angeles as opposed to being held in Oakland, Alameda County in Northern California. And at that point, I had become an independent journalist, and I was tapped by some Northern California publications to cover the trial for them. So I attended the trial every day. But prior to that, looking at the media perceptions of Oscar Grant. And that wasn't my actual first trial, but like I said, I attended every day, and it was such a what's the word I'm looking for? It was such an impactful experience. I saw that he had been murdered by Johannes Messerly, that is the former BART police officer, but he was also murdered in the media. His character was assassinated. And then when we got to the courts, he was murdered in the court. He was murdered by the judge and by the defense attorney. What do I mean, murdered by the defense attorney? Mm-hmm. The defense attorney, whose name escapes me now, but he's known in Northern California for defending police officers accused of misconduct, correctional officers, etc. He made a motion to the judge. He asked that the judge please ask the prosecutor or instruct the prosecutor and the prosecutor's witnesses not to refer to Oscar Grant as the victim because we don't know that a crime has occurred yet. And I was like, wow. And so the judge honored his request. In the media, because of the legal filings that this defense attorney made, he said that Oscar Grant had fentanyl in his system at the time of his death. So that goes out across, the world. It goes out in the media, etc. By 5 or so months later, as I'm sitting in court, it's like the last pre-trial hearing before the actual trial begins. And the judge has asked that a gag order be placed. So the attorneys are not supposed to talk to the press. But I'm sitting in court as the attorney states in court, well, we found that the fentanyl that was in his system had been administered by the hospital to lessen his pain. But now the world thinks he's on drugs. Wow. And you can't go correct this now because the judge has said to you, don't talk to the media. And again, I was like, wow. And, other testimony that had been brought in by the defense. And I'm just like, yeah, he's been murdered in the physical. His character has been murdered in the media, and he's being murdered in the courtroom. So that's why it's called The Murders of Oscar Grant. And it's a playbook. If you notice from that time, we can start with Trayvon Martin, actually. Oscar was murdered in 2009. And you look at Trayvon Martin, we can go back prior to Oscar Grant. Certainly we can come to present day. All of these victims of police murder, they've run the exact same playbook. They kill them physically. They murder them in the media. They murder them in the courts. I remember when Sandra Bland was murdered down in Texas. Mm-hmm. Not too long afterwards, she had marijuana in her system. Here we go. Mm-hmm. Here we go. What does that have to do with this cop who, if your audience members remember when the videos came out, what does that have to do with this cop who intentionally took Sandra Bland out of the view of the dash camera? Mm-hmm. He intentionally took her out of the view of the dash camera. What does that have to do with the fact that there's another video out there somewhere, someone who stopped and saw it, and we hear Sandra Bland asking them, "Thank you, please record this," and the cop tells that person, "Move along." What does that have to do with this? What does marijuana in her system have to do with the actions of this pig cop? Excuse me, I'm getting upset. Ooh, let me calm down. Let me calm down.
Or not, right? It's not a thing that is, it's not a thing that should be common, right? It's not a thing that,
Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you were saying, what was your question?
Yes, no, that you thoroughly answered the question. I was just going to ask you about the two books, but that means we're going to have you. We got to have you
Well,
back a lot more.
it's more than two books, but that's the Oscar Grant book. So
Right,
that's
and
my recollections of the trial. I quote from the trial transcripts and give my own analysis also.
and was going to ask you also about Some of Us Are Brave, interviews and conversations with sisters in the struggle.
So Some of Us Are Brave is interviews that I conducted over the years on the radio show here in Los Angeles, KPFK, the Pacifica station in Los Angeles. And it was basically, these are the interviews that I conducted. I was part of a collective of Black women that were on the air, and we called our show Some of Us Are Brave, but I did not have access to the other women's interviews or audio. But, as a journalist, I keep receipts of all my work. And I looked around, I said, there's some good stuff here. I'm going to put out a book of all of these interviews that were conducted because it's good for historical reasons. It's good to document Black women's experiences, their voices, some of their thoughts, which may or may not have changed over time, catching them at a historical moment, etc. Some well-known, some lesser known, but the issues, how they impact Black people, how they impact Black women, and by extension, Black people. So it's a 2-volume work from Daraja Press, which is based out in Canada. There's Some of Us Are Brave, which was self-published. And then we also have, I have an ebook on reparations, self-published. It's called Reparations Not Yet, A Case for Reparations and Why We Must Wait. And the most recent book, I helped Deborah Jones to write a memoir, What We Stood For, The Life of a Revolutionary Black Woman. Deborah Jones is the woman who testified against Maulana Karenga in 1970, that he conspired and assisted in torturing her. And it was her testimony that sentenced him, his wife, and 2 members of the US organization to prison.
And those are, yeah, and when you're talking about that,
through Diasporic Africa Press, based in New York.
And that's just was released last year in 2024.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that was released February of 2024. Volume 2 of Some of Us Are Brave was January of 2024. Volume 1 was in the fall of 2023.
And especially from the last interview you talked about, these interviews are really important in terms of documenting history, but there's a particular nuance that I think you believe is very important, specifically with that, right? Like in terms of documenting what goes on in Black struggles, right? Well, like the struggle is positive. We're trying to uplift Black people. We're trying to, like, Karenga Kwanzaa, right? The story is important. Why?
I'm sorry.
No, I said the story is incredibly important when you were talking about the person who was victimized by Karenga.
Yes.
And it seems like this is a theme in a lot of civil rights revolutionary struggles. This story particularly important. Why as a writer, someone covering it, someone hearing it, why?
Well, one of the reasons is because we don't have a lot of Black women's stories from revolutionary nationalists, cultural nationalists, Pan-Africanist movements. If you look at the landscape, the majority of Black women's stories come from Black Panther Party women. And there's nothing wrong with that. but we need to hear more from us women. We need to hear more from Provisional Government Republic of New Africa women. We need to hear more from East women. We need to hear more from Congress of African People women, Haitiana women down in New Orleans. We need to hear about their stories. We have Safia Bukhari's The War Before, which doesn't really go into a lot of the cultural, but fortunately, we have her story as being a part of that East Coast branch, that Black Liberation Army branch of the Black Panther Party. Of course, we have Assata's story. But what did we have? I think after, first we had Assata. After Safia's story, we didn't have anything else until Nkechi Taifa came with her book, Black Power, Black Lawyer. And then I've forgotten the sister's name. Thank you. We don't have the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. We don't have the story from those sisters. Some of the stories of the organization are out. But what is it about not just the women's voices, but coming from that particular cultural nationalist Pan-Africanist street? African Liberation Support Committee, the sisters who have participated in that Pan-Africanist street. I was getting ready to say, I've forgotten, that's horrific that I've forgotten her name. Her name escapes me. I haven't forgotten the name. But she's in Atlanta, Georgia. And I believe the name of her book is 1312 Lynch Street. And I can't remember the sister's name, but she was a member of the RNA 11. Those workers in the provisional government who were set up and arrested in 1970 and ambushed down in Jackson, Mississippi. She's written her memoir. So that's 4 books that I can think of, as opposed to, you know, the works of that are on Panthers or Panther women or by Panther women.
Right.
Those folks who consider themselves to be, as I said, nationalists, revolutionary nationalists, Pan-Africanists, those stories are few and far in between. And so Deborah's story is important, not only because she's speaking as someone who was victimized by Maulana Karenga. Give us a glimpse of what it was like for you being young and impressionable and being in Los Angeles and knowing Bunchy Carter, because the Panthers organized at Fremont High School, knowing some of the people in the Panther Party and choosing the US organization. What was that like on a day-to-day basis? What was that like growing up down the street from a leading US member? What was that like? Your life prior to and then after, now that you have been victimized? I thought that story was absolutely important.
No, thank you very much. We are talking about the this, like, you got me. I had the focus of where I wanted to go in terms of 2025 from a writer's perspective, when the future and all the other stuff. But you are so compelling.
You ask me a question, I'll be gone. You got to reel me in, bro.
No, I don't want to reel you in. That's the point. Like, I don't want to reel you in. You keep talking, I keep learning. Like, I'm geek like that. When someone starts talking and I start learning, I'm like, oh no, wait, that's right. Let me get more clarification on that. But 2025, right? 2024, going into 2025, where do you see us going right now in this space?
Well, when you say us, who is the us you're speaking of?
Black people who are conscious, people who, have a perspective that, your perspective on where we are, right? So you get to say it from your perspective of what you think, right? And whoever we could be, right? Like whoever you're included in, where, like that is in that spirit.
Well, obviously, there's more work that needs to be done.
Let me add to that a little bit. What
Okay.
Jonathan is saying. What about it? Because when you're talking about these organizations, you're really talking about historic organizations that played a major role in how far Black folk have come in this country. So
Mhm.
how does that play a role into where we go?
Well, I mean, again, I'm talking about documenting something that has occurred. I want to stress that we have to document now as things are occurring, but we document to show that we were here, to show what we did. What can we learn from what we did? What are the lessons? Are there any lessons? If so, what are they? Again, we were here. We was here. This is what we did. And when I look at some of the things that we have done, I just find it amazing. I find it amazing. Again, you have to forgive me. These names, they all begin to run together. So I forget specific names. But it's a couple, some folks in Brooklyn put together a film called The East. The Sun Also Rises on the East, in the East. The brother who published my book, Diasporic Africa Press, Kwasi Konadu, has a book on the children's school, the Shule of the East. I look at this documentation and I'm in awe of the fact that these Black folks in these nationalist, cultural nationalist, Pan-Africanist, nationalist institutions had relationships with revolutionary Guyana, right? I look at the fact that Herman Ferguson was able to flee the country and find refuge in revolutionary Guyana, where Walter Rodney was. I see the links between the East and other organizations in Guyana. I learn about the fact that the brothers who were convicted of conspiracy, not of pulling the trigger, I want to stress that, not of pulling the trigger, but in the trumped up conspiracy to murder Bunchy and John of the Black Panther Party, these US organization members named Steiner, Ali and Watani Steiner, were able to get to Guyana after they escaped from prison via the help of members of the Congress of African People.
Wow.
I look at the fact that UC Quayana, comrade of Walter Rodney, basically in exile also because of the work they were doing with the Working People's Alliance. He's 90-something years old now, living in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm in awe of the fact that his wife, his partner, his comrade, Mama Chaiko, is said to have been one of the main ones proselytizing to Black people in the East and the East organization and other communities. Guyana is where we need to go, is where we need to set up. So her even laying that foundation, that groundwork, I just find it fascinating. So again, talking about the linkages, this is history. This is documented. We need to know these things. And we need to know, regardless of how beautiful it may look and how ugly it might be underneath, or how ugly it looks on the surface, to see if there's some beauty that we can find, some utility that exists.
But where do we go? Where do we go? I got the history.
And after we do that, what do we do that now that we are right here and this crazy man is about to take office?
Because I guess that's where, because that's really the subtext, right? The subtext is like, yo, like,
he coming back. He back in office.
And I'm feeling like, and maybe it's an overreaction on my part, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm feeling like the over, like active, like white nationalists who have power, like objectively described white nationalists. We're not like, I'm not name calling, right? Like I don't think Stephen Miller would think it was an insult by saying that, you know, he had white nationalist affiliations. I think he'd be like, yeah, and like I don't even think think it's an insult, but like, you know, when they talk about mass deportation and police and the way that they're talking about ramping up policing, and the fact that so many people in the United States just openly were like, yeah, and like Like the level of white, overt white, like white people just solid up, right? Like they just banded together and were like, "We doing this," right? It
Well,
seems like that. So
clearly, self-defense has to be a part of our agenda. Physical self-defense, but also self-defense in terms of we need to strengthen our internal mutual aid solidarity networks. All of these things need to be strengthened within our communities, especially the mutual aid. And mutual aid is part of self-defense. How we protect ourselves, how we become more self-reliant. Trump won, Biden won by 73 million, but Trump had 70 million. This time around, he gathered that 73 million, or maybe even 4
right,
million
like
more.
it
That's
was like
saying something.
Biden had 80 million, and Trump had 73 million. Harris got 74 million,
Mm-hmm.
and Trump got 76 million. So Trump gained 2 million voters,
He gained.
right?
He
Right, like
gained
Harris.
more people.
Right, in the swing states, Harris did as well, if not better, than Biden in
Mm-hmm.
terms of just sheer numbers, right? Like he got more, she got more numbers in Georgia than any Democrat in the history of elections, right,
Mm-hmm.
including Biden.
Mm-hmm.
And that similar numbers are true in all the other swing states. Now, in the non-swing states, she didn't do as well, but in the swing states, she did as well or
Mm-hmm.
better than Biden. But white folks came out.
White
And
folks
some
absolutely
Latinos joined
came
them, right? White women stayed true, right? Like just
Yeah.
be white, and
But I
So
think also because of what I call the wonders of the internet, when COVID hit and the world shut down, we couldn't go outside. We ain't had nothing to do. So we were on the internet. We were streaming, watching TV. We saw things, a lot of us for the first time that we've only heard about. We've seen them now. And that has continued with, even though there's no more lockdown, COVID is still in effect. That has continued with the rise of TikTok, the rise of Instagram, the rise of YouTube, all of social media. We're able to see things now that we've only heard about before. And I think that more people have been able to see the collusion of the Democratic Party, the complicity of the Democratic Party, the corruption and rottenness of the Democratic Party. More people are talking about fascism than ever before, and they're linking it not just to Trump, but also to the Democratic Party. And so when we talk about what can we do or what do we need to do, we've got to be able to defend ourselves, to protect ourselves, to rely on ourselves. Trump got more than he had before, but we should be every year that goes by brings a little bit more clarity, I think, in terms of the visual evidence of the complicity and the corruption of the Democratic Party. I think it should, if it hasn't. It
explain
should
what
be,
do you
it
mean by
should be
that?
helping us with clarity.
Explain, break it down even more.
You have a Kamala, I'm sorry, that's the Black New African pronunciation. Kamala, all these Jamalas that I know, Kamala. You have a Kamala Harris who has told us, I'm really not going to do much more different than Joe Biden. So that means you're not going to rein in police and you're not going to stop genocide. And you have no program specifically for Black people. You're not going to stop the genocide in Palestine. You are not going to turn from and shun this white supremacist outpost known as Israel. You are not going to defund police. You are not going to do anything that might touch qualified immunity or rein in and check their power. You're going to continue business as usual with a AKA flip of your hair with some skiwi and some pearls and pearls and chucks.
But
Okay.
one of the things I want to add to the conversation, though, we just had the deputy mayor on from the city of Newark. And she was talking about, I don't know if you had a chance to hear her. She was talking about the Office of Violence and Prevention that they just closed. And she was talking about that organization, that office was funded with $5 billion of federal dollars, right, in order to stop violence, particularly in our community, right? And if you talk to most Black mayors, they will tell you that, they're suffering really the same problems. And if you take a look at what Newark has been able to do with violence reduction, they've been able to institute a number of programs because they were creative with funding. But they didn't do that just with local funding, meaning 5% of the police budget. They did it by having access, as Keisha said. She wrote one grant, which she was able to get $20 million of COVID money from, right? And then, of course, she was able to tap into that $5 billion violence prevention federal government office. But that office now doesn't exist. And so, as you just stated, as we're talking about Trump coming into office, nobody knows, right, exactly what offices are going to be funded, what programs are going to be funded. But if we're talking about these racist organizations that supported them, I think we've already got a pretty good idea that anything that involves stopping violence in our community is not going to be funded. So yes, we're going to have to try to figure out, as she said, we're going to have to try to figure out ways. How do we fund our own freedom? How do we fund our own movement? How do we do that? Because those organizations, those Black historic organizations now, most of them are no longer around. And then they're going to be, trying to get Donald Trump to fund them. How are these new organizations going to be funded? And I'm saying that in terms of what you just said, well, we now have to begin to start thinking about what do we do?
Because this funding that came through at the same time, the funding was going to Ukraine and going to Israel. And not to harp on Israel, but Israel is bombing Yemen, they bombing Lebanon, they bombing Syria. Israel is terrorizing the Middle East with American dollars. We should be able to see that now a lot more clearly because we've got social media and correspondents all over the world, whether they know they correspondents or not, showing us and telling us, talking to us about what's happening. So in terms of these organizations we had in the past, one of the reasons we had them is because they resonated with people. That's why people joined. If we're not speaking to the needs, aspirations, and hopes of our communities, we're not going to have members. We have to take assessments. What is it that our people need? What is it that we want? Let's come together and provide it.
I agree, right? Like I agree on some levels, right? Like I agree on that we have to create and have and maintain institutions of our own, because that's the basis, right, for how we do that. But also, is there like a nuance or a a way of, like, a lot of the activists that we've interviewed talk about, and it's real strange, right? Like they talk about how the Biden administration for the first time was listening to activists on the ground. We had Maria Lopez on from the Ironbound Community Corporation. She does like national environmental work and environmental racism, and she's talking about the dollars that went in to actually help on the ground make actual change. We had LaKeesha Eure, the deputy mayor of Newark, who's dedicated her life to activism and anti-violence campaigns. We were talking about the Biden administration, and under the office of Harris, for the very first time, right, started recognizing uh, the work that they were doing and spreading it across the country. That's gone, right? And in its place is someone who it is politics, national politics, even democratic politics. Isn't it like sometimes working with the person you'd most rather fight, as opposed to there were a lot of people who didn't vote. They're like, I'm not going to support the Republican. I'm not going to support the Democrat because what's going on with Israel, right? They're
Mhm.
blatantly supporting genocide that is there, right? Other people made the calculation that said that like Harris has said certain things where like I think she's gonna be beefing with Netanyahu in ways that Trump is not. Trump is gonna be like, do more, right? And even they said so, like they said it bluntly, right? Like whereas Democrats were fighting with each other about whether we should stop weapons, enforce we were hearing debates about enforce the law, right? The law says that if you think they're going to be, in the State Department says you can't get weapons if you think they're going to use it for human rights abuses. We heard that debate going on, right? There was no such debate going on right now, like none. They'll just be like, how much you need, what do you need, and we can really just get rid of everybody in Gaza, right? Like that is going to be that seems like it's going to be US policy. It seems like in every level it will be far worse. Now, is there something to that thinking that this is the person we'd rather fight? Let's have these fights right now, as opposed to like, let's not show support here so that the fight we have now is we have like blatant overt white nationalists. Like it's not even an insult. Like I do not think I'm insulting many of his advisors or many of his supporters when I say the word white nationalist. I do not think it's controversial to them,
Right.
right? Uh, is there a way? I mean, is there? Do you think that Black people should opt out of politics, as in like politics corrupt, Democratic Party corrupt? Because a lot of I'm a high school debate coach. We work in high school debate. Many people have made the argument blatantly that Black women should not be involved in anything that dealt with the federal government because the federal government is bad for Black women, right? And they
Mm.
say it blatantly, like do not get involved. So any of the work that would be done in terms of the stuff that LaKeesha Eure is doing, or the stuff that she's working on a federal level on, shouldn't be done because it's always bad. Don't, right? Others push back and they're like, hey, there's a nuance that's here because money, like tax dollars, are taken from you, right? They're going to be spent, and engagement in politics is simply determining how that money is spent. Is it going to be spent on bombs in Gaza? Is it going to be spent on anti-violence programs? That's just the debate. It's not a debate about whether they'll take the money or whether the money will be spent, but what is it be spent on? And it's a necessary fight. Where do you fall on that with given the the reality that there are things about the Democratic Party, there are things about the Republican Party, there are things about like white people in politics, or even Black people who may be distant from us in politics that we don't like. They do things that we don't like. How like what is your stance on that? Like where do you fall on that particular line? Is it engage, not engage? This is good that it's
Engage,
happened.
engage, and get what you can from the system and bring it back to your community. That's what Black women have always done. And, there's a book called The Grift. Once again, author's name slips my mind at the moment, but it's called The Grift. And it's looking at Black Republicans immediately after the Civil War. And it's comparing them to the Black Republicans today. One of the things he says, the key features is these are Black Republicans who were being elected by Black people coming from Black communities, pushing forward a progressive agenda. So they talked about universal education.
Mm.
They talked about the vote. They were putting forth regarding land issues, employment issues, the things that their communities needed, that their communities told them, go to Washington and do this for us, which is different. Tamu Kanyama, 11, it wasn't even 1312 Lewis Street. 1312 Lynch Street was the headquarters of the PGRNA. 1148 Lewis Street was one of the RNA residences that was also attacked. My bad. Thank you so much. these are Republicans who were putting forth they were given the mandate from their communities, which is different from the Republicans, Black Republicans of today. Thank you, Clay Kane, the Grip, who are not being elected by Black people. They're being elected by white people to further white interests. But because they're Black, they're hoping, oh, Black people will vote for me. And most Black people are like, hell no, we ain't voting for you. You're a Republican. Republican Party of today has that racist connotation, whereas the Republican Party after or during enslavement and during Reconstruction, their position was free labor, free land, free soil, which is one of the reasons why they were quote unquote against slavery. Not because they love Black people, they just didn't agree with that particular policy. My point being is that you engage where you are. You know, the freedmen, when General Sherman came through, they told him, we need land. This is the authority we're dealing with. This is the authority right here, right now. We need us some land. The authority came back later on and rescinded Special Field Order 15, which had given those freedmen land along the Sea Islands. So we deal with the entities where they are. At the same time, we create our own institutions. If I can get some money out the federal government to run my anti-violence program, as I'm going to the community, asking them to fund it also, it relieves some of the pressure, right? It makes the work a little easier. Unfortunately, we get too many people in our communities across the country that rely on that funding, that allow that funding to dictate the work that they do. They chase that funding, and when that funding dries up, because they don't have a backup plan or they've never cultivated a key constituency, an additional funding source, once that main funding source collapses, the program collapses.
Right. And I think of
a Spora, I might be saying your name wrong, but appreciate it. Thank you.
and it seems like it's a do everything, right? Like as in you got to get funding where you can get it. You build your own institutions.
And that was a long, I told you got to reel me in because I'll run my mouth. The
No,
point
it's all
being
good.
is we got to engage. I believe we got to engage in Black women historically because we are the caretakers of our families. That's one of the reasons why we vote Democratic so much. It's because of this quote unquote social safety net that we believe the Democratic Party stands for and believe that the Republican Party wants to shred to smithereens. We don't want our families to be harmed. We don't want our mamas, our daddies. We don't want Big Mama. We don't want Pawpaw. We don't want the babies. We don't want our men. We don't want ourselves harmed. So we go with the Democratic Party. But as I said, I believe that we've been seeing more and more these last few years. We should have been paying it if we were paying attention. How corrupt they are. We've got to do something else. We have to do something else.
Can I have a question?
A loop, continuous loop that's getting tired.
So you're saying, from my understanding, you're saying like the Republican Party is bad, the Democratic Party is bad. So like, what should be the alternative that young people like me should look at for that safety net?
Well, it depends. All politics are local. So, for example, there was a movement a few years ago to not vote for president, but vote on the down ballot. Go down your ballot and see those other local races. We just had an election during the election here in California. In Los Angeles, we have what's known as the prosecutor to judge pipeline. Most of the judges come from the carceral prosecutorial background. So we've had public defenders who have decided that they want to run for Superior Court judges. Judges are elected office. City council people, elected office. County supervisors, elected office. State senators, elected office. People who have positions that can either provide funding to the community that needs it, or actually have, dare I say, the power of life, death, or freedom that affects us, such as judges. Those are elected offices. Grassroots work needs to be done to make sure that we are aware of who these people are. What is their platform? What is our community platform? Are we going to get behind more prosecutors? Are we going to get behind some compassionate attorneys who are rooted in the community and are familiar with the various resources and services that are available, so that when someone comes before them, they don't just throw them in the cell? They perhaps mandate drug treatment, mandate some type of rehabilitation. And even though the word mandate, it gets into coercion, it's still better than going to jail in many instances. Jail is not going to be, has never been, and should not be the cure-all for every social ill in our communities. And we need judges who understand that.
And so it seems like
That's what I would suggest for you.
Masoma, is it follow up?
Oh yeah, because like going back to like what we were first talking about, like with journalism and like Black topics, when it comes to journalism, as someone, because I write for the Hilltop, I don't know if you know what that is, but I write.
University Hilltop?
Yeah, I'm a news and politics writer for the Hilltop, and working in those spaces, like how do you suggest like having conversations and having stories that like center around like Black voices and Blackness? Because from my understanding, from like what I've been, from my experience, it doesn't seem as though like Howard University is centering around like stories about Black people in the community. It's mostly about things that are on a federal scale rather than like community based. So how would you suggest I go about, or any student goes about doing that?
You write for the Hilltop. I'm not quite sure. I'm a refugee from Howard. I didn't graduate. I dropped out. But went to Howard for 3 years, lived in Washington, D.C. 1 year. Wonderful. I loved my experience being in Washington, D.C. I feel fondly toward it. Wish I could get back there except for the snow. But yeah, the Hilltop. You're being trained in traditional journalism, which values objectivity. If you notice, if you've been paying attention, and I say you, not just you, but all of us, what has mainstream media revealed to us over this past year? People call it mainstream media, commercial media, corporate media, legacy media. If we've been paying attention, we should be horrified. We should be angry. Excuse me. We should be horrified and angry at the absolute collusion and complicity of media in this country in the genocide of the Palestinian people. You should not be a Muslim to be horrified at what is happening at Palestine, in Palestine. We have seen which babies have been beheaded and which babies have not. We have seen who has been burned alive and who has not. We have seen who has been murdered wearing press jackets and press helmets and in vehicles marked press, when they should be we have seen who's been targeted and murdered when they should have been protected and allowed to report and tell the world what is happening. We have seen that. We haven't just heard that. And because Al Jazeera in particular has more people on the ground, we've seen what's been happening in Palestine. But because of the rise of social media and regular people, we now see what's happening in Sudan. We see how women would rather commit suicide rather than submit to rape. We see what's happening in Congo. We have been seeing for a few years now, but we continue to see what's happening in Haiti. There's a bias against Haiti that is a 200-year-old beef. White supremacy has never forgiven Haiti for breaking free, and they continue to punish. But it is through the media we are seeing now French West Africa throw out the French. We're seeing Ivory Coast, Senegal, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. We can see this now. And the reason we see this now is because media is breaking from that Western mold. Point being, you, sis, are going to have to break out of that Western mold. Whether you're talking about Afrish or Ebonics or African American vernacular English, there's a concept called code switching. We talk one way around white folks are in a professional setting, but when we get around our people, we talk another way. You're going to have to learn how to code switch in journalism. And one of the ways you do that is you can have a reporter's notebook. Now, I don't know if I don't know how the Hilltop of the Collegian, whoever it is, how they're going to feel about that. But you have a right to have your own blog. You have a right to have a Twitter account. You have that right. And if you want to put forth your own thoughts, your own analysis based on what you have seen, you have that right. But you also have a duty and responsibility, especially when you see reporting that is lacking. We ain't even talking about wrong, just lacking. I'm not talking about reporting that's lying the way the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post have been lying about Palestine. Just reporting that might be lacking in nuance or in a different point of view. You have a responsibility to correct that. I told y'all I can go. You got to reel me in.
No, I mean you're going well, right?
Reel
No,
me in.
we are that we appreciate the learning. That is, these are good questions and good answers, right? Like, Masoma, do you have another follow up?
Oh yeah, I do. Because I know you were talking about like different. Because every time you talk about like different books and like things that to educate ourselves on like Blackness and like stories. So again, as a Howard student, because everything is about being from Howard, what are like some history books or like anything pertaining to like education that can inform me on like a lot of things about like Blackness and like different stories?
Like awfully broad. Sis, you're gonna have to be specific, narrow it down. That's awfully broad.
I'm sorry.
Awfully broad.
I don't know how to narrow like.
Okay, let's do this. I'm gonna do a shameless plug because I am a journalist. Some of Us Are Brave, volumes 1 and 2, the books that I have edited. These are interviews with Black women of varying backgrounds. Carol Boyce Davies, I believe she's currently professor at Howard University. I interviewed her to talk about her book on Claudia Jones, Black communist feminist from the 1950s, creator of Carnival, but also creator of the West Indian Gazette, first Black newspaper in Britain. So these are people that you need to know about, historical folks you need to know about. So shameless plug, Some of Us Are Brave, volumes 1 and 2, written by myself, published by Daraja Press. But in addition to that, that's awfully broad. That's an awfully broad request.
Maybe like, because I think like from everyone's perspective of what Howard was like back in the day is like more like centered around like Blackness and like Black stories and everything. But nowadays it just seems like Howard University does have Black students, but it's separating itself from like the organic Blackness.
It has always been that way. It was that way. I'm not even gonna tell you how old I am. It was that way when I went there. It's always been like that. Howard has always been like that. That's not to say you need to drop out or transfer. Get your degree, get what you can out of the school, get your degree and get on. But Howard has always been that way.
That's very interesting.
Have you heard about the paper bag test?
No. Oh, wait.
You never heard about the paper bag test?
No, that sounds familiar though.
Well, depending upon who you talk to, it was either the test to quote unquote get into a fraternity or sorority, or it was a test to get into the university, depending on who you talk to. If you dark it in a paper bag, you ain't getting in.
Oh, I saw that on Twitter. Okay, I know what you're talking about. Okay, right.
Mhm.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that was.
Nathan Hare, who passed away last year at the age of 90 something, author of Black Anglo-Saxons, was the organizer of the first Black Studies department at San Francisco State University in Northern California. He taught at Howard University. E. Franklin Frazier, Black Neophorus. I ain't telling my age. I was at Howard when April Silver and Ross Baraka and Sister Soldier Lisa were there. We Are Worth Fighting For. Now that's Joshua, I think. But yeah, that's a good book. We Are Worth Fighting For. Is his name Joshua? All right. Can the sister who keeps chiming in, tell us who the author of the book is. That's a good book for you.
Okay.
You can start with, on Howard history. There are even a couple of videos out there in the world about the first student takeover at Howard University, 1968. I believe Ross Barakanim's takeover of Howard, that may have been the second one. I think it was only those two.
I think it was one in 68.
Yeah, 68 or 69. It was a wave of Black students taking over universities, Black and white. So why would Black students take over a Black university? Let's explore that question, shall we? Not necessarily on the show. We ain't got time for that. But that's a good question for you. Why would Black students take over a Black university? What was happening at a Black university that it needed to be taken over?
Okay.
Do tell. I see Edward Riley over there chuckling. You know what's going on. Joshua Myers. I knew his name was Joshua. It all begins to come together after a while.
I'm absolutely impressed because I think that, we were talking to her before you came on. And, one of the questions I asked her was about, was there any revolutionary students on that campus? And one of the things she said that her generation are trying to be politically correct, right? So they're not really trying to ruff any feathers, right? Even if you talk to, our brother Larry Ham, who was back in the day himself, fighting, for the issues of the day, like apartheid and so forth. These students, what I'm hearing from her, are not really allowed, right, or not being trained in that way to use their voices on a Black campus. So when you make that statement about, on a Black campus and what's really going on, the question is how are these students being allowed to use their voices freely? And what she was saying is that her generation doesn't really want to ruff any feathers. I
think that, and I don't know everyone's age here, but I feel pretty confident in saying that most generations of Black folks, when it comes to student activism, our mamas and daddies, grandmamas and granddaddies come from the school of, we ain't send you there for that.
Right.
We ain't send you there for that.
Yep.
So the thought of going to school and getting kicked out, you got kicked out because why?
Yeah.
Oh, you better bring your butt home, or you better get your act together. You better get back out there. Because of what education has always meant to us as Black people in this country. Interestingly enough, I don't have it in front of me, but somewhere out here on the internet, there's a video. We saw last spring the wave of student encampments that began in support of universities divesting from Palestine because of the genocide. Those, pronounce your name for me, sister. Is it Misoma?
Mm-hmm. I pronounced it very well.
Okay. So these student encampments are reminiscent of the shanty towns students participated in to get their universities to divest from apartheid South Africa. So you should look into that. That's a historical phenomenon that you should definitely look into. But interestingly enough, out here at USC, which is one of the most expensive schools in the country, certainly here in California, they had an encampment, and most of these encampments across the country were violently dismantled by the university administration in collusion with police and corporate interests. But there was this one interview of parents who came out in support of their students, of their children who were demonstrating for Palestine. And some of these, you could tell they were immigrants. I remember this one man saying, my daughter is here. I have to be here to support her. And I just thought that was interesting in terms of, if we were to juxtapose that, how many of our parents and grandparents would have told us, don't you get involved in that black stuff. You get your education and you come on home. You get out there, get you a job, and that's how you make a difference. That's how you pull yourself and us and your people out of poverty. So the education angle, especially in terms of Black universities, absolutely the generations are being programmed away from activism. Absolutely. They've always been that way. But we're living in a different age in terms of, again, the access. With the rise of social media and the internet, you're no longer isolated. You're no longer alienated. You've got worldwide communities out there that you can plug into that will support you, even if it's only emotional support. And student journalists at Columbia University were able to cover the encampment when the New York Times couldn't get in. The rise of student journalists is very, very promising. The Hilltop needs to figure out, or the folks on the Hilltop need to figure out where they're going, what side of history they're going to be on.
And thank you. I know that we're keeping you past time, and
I'm good. I told you I can go. You got to reel me in. Reel me. I'll keep you out here all night. You have to reel me in.
Oh man, and we want to do that too, man. Like we,
I'm curious to know what happened. Did they kick you out of Howard, or did you just become too revolutionary and just sit there?
I left. They didn't kick me out. They didn't kick me out. I ended up leaving. I was also I attended Howard, and my consciousness was raising at that time. You know, I attended Howard, I'm about to tell my age, in the mid to late 80s. So at the same time, I'm going to Howard, and Frank Snowden is teaching in the classics department. The exact same Frank Snowden who in 1968-69, when the Black students took over the university, they hung him in effigy because he was such a horrible Negro. He's still teaching there when I'm there. Wow. This man who it was reported, I know I'm a journalist, I should have my sources. I can show you my friends who told me, he said in class, if you mention John Henry Clark, if you mention Yosef Ben Yakinen, if you mention Sheikh Anta Diop, you will get an F. Not if you use them as a source. If you mention their names, you will get an F. I'm at Howard during this time when Lister Middleton and South Carolina Educational Television is broadcasting the Nile Valley Conference that's held at Morehouse in Atlanta, when it's showing interviews with Asa Hilliard, Dr. Frances Welsing. Frances Welsing is still alive, and they kicked her out, by the way. Still alive and well in Washington, D.C. Frances Welsing run out of Howard University. Tony Brown just about run out of Howard University. Naeem Akbar, all of our quote-unquote greats. Dr. Samuel Yet, who was a journalist who wrote the book called The Choice, run out of Howard. I'm using the word run out. Probably ran from, like I ran, is better. It's probably a better descriptor. So all of this is happening, and I'm trying to reconcile my education at Howard with my education on Georgia Avenue, on Florida Avenue Southeast, on U Street. And I was like, I'm out. I gotta go. Well, I no longer had the desire to find the money to continue funding my education.
Yeah, that's just like I completely understand. Like for some reason, that's the same conclusion I'm coming when it comes to going to Howard. I really love going there, but it's just a lot of things that aren't like, because when people talk to me about what Howard is, Howard doesn't live up to that expectation of like
Not at all. Not at all.
true like Black, because I thought everything was going to be centered around Blackness and loving and like activism and like listening to all the stories from Rajay Baraka, and I thought that was how that's what Howard was going to be like, storming into Founders Library and telling them to like to fix our bathroom, to fix our dorm, but none of that happens. Like we had a tent for the Palestine for a standing, and it was only one tent, and then that was in the middle of the summer. No one was on campus, and then when we come back to campus, I get handed a flyer from like an activist group. I forgot what it's called, but they basically said that they're not allowed to show their organization on campus unless they will get like kicked off of campus or get fined for whatever the reason was. So it's like a lot of.
What year are you at Howard? What year are you in?
I'm a sophomore.
Oh, you just got there, po thing.
Yeah.
I know you keep your head down. Sophomore, theoretically, you got 2 more years. I know it seems like hell. I know it. You like, how am I going to do it? Take it from somebody who knows. Get your degree. Continue to learn, continue to study, continue to grow, but also get that degree. You got to code switch. If I had been able to, I would, because at the time I was, in my early 20s. How am I going to stay the same person if I get this degree? I see now how I should have done it. But at the time I was like, I'm out. No, I'm telling you now, get your degree, but continue to study, continue to grow, continue to be in conversation with Lawrence Ham, Jonathan Austin, Edward Riley, and all these other folks. But get your degree. Because at the very least, you're going to need to sustain yourself when you decide what your work is going to be. And I'm not talking about your career. I'm talking about your work. What is going to be your contribution to what our people need? So definitely get your degree.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, right, for coming out. And we got to have you back.
Real quick. That book, Joshua Myers, The Takeover in '89, led by Black Neoforce and other Black students. Howard University elected Lee. What was the boy's name?
Lee Atwater. Was it Lee Atwater? Right.
Republican
strategist.
White Republican strategist. White racist. I know that's all redundant. Oxymoron. White.
The Willie Horton ad, he was responsible for it. Yeah, Lee Atwater.
Yeah, to the chair of the board of Howard University Board of Trustees. That's when Black folks said, "Oh, hell no. We're not."
That was the year after he released the Willie Horton ad that made it like this Black man raping white women and scaring half the nation with the image of, Black men attacking white women. You got to vote for Bush because he'll protect you. Protect your white woman from these evil black men.
This is our. I'm gonna be there with you. This is our HQ.
Wait, but why did they elect him as board of trustees?
Boards of trustees raise money for the university. So if this white man is sitting at the top of this university, it sends a signal. Everything is safe. Everything is cool. You can put your money over here, which is why y'all can't be out there protesting. Which is why you can't be having these flyers. Which is why they'll allow you maybe one tent during the summer where can't nobody see it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Now don't you drop out of Howard on Monday? Don't you do it?
No. I invested way too much money. I'm not dropping out.
Drop out on Monday.
Investment now. I have to. So.
Well, thank you again so much. We want to definitely have you back. This was their first time at All Politics Local?
I think my second.
Right, because you've been here before.
I've been on with Baba Zaid before.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And we got to have you back a lot more. I learned a lot again. My students learn a lot. Some of my students and my coaches are listening with the perspective, with wanting to hear you. So we would definitely want to have you back, and we'll probably, if
I would love
again,
to
like
come back.
email you offline just to talk to some of our students as well.
Okay, just know you got to reel me in because I can go.
No, that's good. We appreciate that. 100%, right? Like that's wisdom just coming out. So very much
Okay.
appreciated. And thank
Thank
you
you. Thank you
very
so much
much.
for having me. I appreciate all of you.
No, we appreciate you back. It was an honor. It was a real
Okay.
honor.
Well, still, John, let's find out what she's listening to.
Oh yes. Who's your favorite hip hop artist, individual or group?
I ain't got
What are you
no
listening?
hip hop. I'm a 70s, 80s woman, classic hip hop, golden era hip hop, 90 to 95. I think I stopped listening after 95.
Okay.
So
So,
70s,
well, any
80s,
other music? Who you rocking with now? Who gives you inspiration? When you're doing your writing, when you're
70s,
thinking about
80s,
stuff?
90s. 70s, 80s, 90 to 95 hip hop.
Okay. The mumble
Or
rap era, you're like, nah.
instrumentals with no lyrics.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, thank you. Thank you again. And
Thank
we
Thank
you.
will talk to you soon.
All right, now y'all take care.
Hey, so that was a wonderful segment, and that was amazing. And we are hopefully we'll have her back again very soon. And we are here with Lawrence Ham. Lawrence Ham, also frequent person, probably co-producer at this point of our show, who is here with us. And we're thank you and honored to have you here again. We have this is the first show of 2025. And you are having a march that in less than 2 weeks, and it has to do with 2025. We were talking about like how we're feeling kind of like it's 1930s, right? Like I don't. It's just seeming. I don't know whether I'm overreacting or not. It just seems like I'm looking at a person who's a white nationalist who wouldn't take it as an insult. Like I'm not name calling right now, right? I'm not name calling. But when Stephen Miller, you're like, oh, he's associated with the white nationalist and white. Yeah, I don't know if he would think that it was an insult. I don't know if he'd be like mad, be like, how dare you look at white nationalism at me? And he's a major advisor to the White House. They're talking about, uh, this price of private prisons has gone up, right, in terms of stock. And we understand why that's happening. They're talking about deporting millions of people. And along with that, they would have to build a nationalized police force with beef it up and beef up detention centers. And once you got them up, I mean, you probably could use them for other things too, right? With all those places. So, 2025. Did we just duck? What's going on? Larry, I mean, we're marching. Like, what is there? What do we expect in 2025? Where do we do? What do we go? Like, what's going on? Like, part of me is just thinking, wow, this might be a battle for young people. This is this is their fight. This is we had our fights. This is their fight. Good luck.
What does that
Good luck with the
mean?
fight.
What does
Don't
that
know what's
mean?
about to jump off next year, but what jumps off, I know y'all be prepared. Just like every generation before. But get ready, because something's coming. So, Larry, what's going on?
Well, congratulations, Jonathan, on
Yes!
your wedding, and Happy New Year,
Well, thank you.
Ed and
I am
Happy New
happy
Year.
to be
Messama.
wonderfully married.
Messama, do I have it right? Messama,
Actually,
The Soma.
So,
Messoma,
but
Messoma.
first, let me get my shout out to Ashley Renee. Ashley Renee, hey, my wife. All right, so I'm just smiling. It's yes, we're about to enter a horrible year, but we entered it great because I got my baby. We good, right? Like I'm set. I recommend falling in love to everybody. That you should do that. Help you get through these times. Fall in love. Marry the right woman. That is absolutely recommended. So if you're saying, hey, how are we gonna get through the year? If it's me, I'm like, you find your soulmate, get married, and yes, set for the year, and then leave it to the kids. It's fight's gonna be. But Soma, y'all should get ready. So talk to me. Thank you for that shout out, Chairman.
All right. I see you very enthused about being married.
I am.
That's
much.
good. That's good.
Very much.
I just want to say, before I say anything about 2025, Masoma, in 1971, I was a student at Princeton University. I had a girlfriend who was a student at Howard University, and I went to visit her at Howard University. And one of the first things I saw when I got to Howard was a copy of the Hilltop newspaper. This was in the fall of 1971. In fact, this was probably October, late September, early October 1971. And I would urge you, if you have archives, if the Hilltop newspaper is archived, to go and look at editions, copies of that paper in 1971. It was a revolutionary newspaper. I had never seen a newspaper like the Hilltop. It was a revolutionary, Black nationalist, Pan-Africanist newspaper that at that time was clearly under control of students who had a revolutionary, Black nationalist, Pan-Africanist perspective. The paper was so good that I brought back copies of the paper to Jersey to show people, to show students that I was in contact with in Jersey, like, this is what we need. Not only did they have a revolutionary, Black nationalist, Pan-Africanist newspaper, they had a revolutionary radio station. What's the radio station on Howard's campus?
Now, I don't think we have one.
Well, they had one in 1971.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a revolution. The first time I turned it on, they were playing speeches of Malcolm X. They were reading poetry of Amiri Baraka. I mean, that newspaper, that radio station at that time was really trying to be connected, at least to me. I wasn't a student at Howard, but I saw that newspaper in 1971. And I would urge you, as WHUR, that's it. Yep. And I would urge you to go to the library if they have it in the archives. Mm-hmm. If not, they might have it on microfilm, microfiche, and look at editions of that paper from like 1970 and 1971. You might find it inspirational. Now, I can't speak to the movement that was on the campus. I only visited on the weekends and didn't visit that many weekends because back then a train ticket to DC was a lot of money for a student, So, but I just say that to contrast, because that's what you'll see. You'll see a contrast 50 years later. We're talking about 53 years later. I'm 71 years old. I saw the Hilltop in 1971. You're going to see a contrast between a paper 53 years ago and the paper that you have on campus today. And I would dare say that the paper reflected the movement that was going on in the country. You know, the student movement is a reflection of the general movement in society. And the Black student movement is a reflection of the movement of Black people in society. And Black people were on fire from 1960 through 1972, were on fire. There were more than 1,000 urban uprisings in the United States. You can read about this in a book called Black Awakening in Capitalist America by Robert L. Allen, who just passed away a few months ago, I understand. But he talks about the fact, you know, because we think of the Newark riots, the Detroit riot, and that's it. There were 1,000 urban uprisings. How many? That's like 100 a year from 60 to 70. And so the student movement was very militant, you know, because Black people were very militant. So if Black students are not militant today, that means they're not reflecting a lot of militancy in the Black community today. This phenomenon of the conservative nature of Black educational institutions, believe it or not, was discussed by Langston Hughes. You know the poet Langston Hughes?
Yes.
Yes. He wrote many books, but one of the books he wrote that no one ever talks about is a book titled Good Morning Revolution. Good Morning Revolution by Langston Hughes. There is an essay in that book, Good Morning Revolution. I believe the title of it is Cowards from the Colleges, where Langston Hughes is excoriating the Black elite that control Black colleges because they were firing Black teachers and expelling Black students who were involved in the civil rights movement. And I really would urge you to read that essay, because this is not a new phenomenon. Like the sister said, that was the guest. This has always been going on. You know, the difference is that in a period where there's a lot of upheaval, you might find a little wiggle room in there somewhere. You know, I mean, I had to leave. She said she left. I had to leave Princeton. I left Princeton. But before I even got through the first semester of my freshman year, I left. But I returned 3 years later, and then I finished. And I think her advice is right. You gotta get that degree. But at the same time, you have a conscience and you have a consciousness. You have both a conscious and consciousness. And Black student protest is not something anyone is going to encourage. I remember when I told my mother that I was gonna, I was still in high school. I told my mother that the day before it was gonna happen, that I was gonna lead a walkout at my high school. My mother said to me, "Larry, why are you throwing your life away?" Just like Sister said. And then when I was a senior at Princeton University and I led a takeover of Nassau Hall, I did the same thing. I told my mother the day before, I'm getting ready to do this. She said, "Why are you throwing your life away? You dropped out of school, you went back, you're on the verge of grad. Why are you doing this?" And at that time, I told my mother that I can't ask people to do something that I'm not going to do myself. So you have to hone your skills. My daughter, by the way, one of my daughters is a journalist. She graduated from the School of Journalism at Rutgers University, and she's in the industry now. She's working for, I don't know, is it still called News One, Ed? I don't know, is it still News One over there in New York City? But anyway, she's working in TV news, you know, and she's working on a book. She did a story on Tulsa, on Black Wall Street. She went down there and interviewed people and everything, and got so fired up about it. Now she's trying to write a book on Black Wall Street. from, I guess, from her perspective. We haven't talked about it too much. So anyway, I just felt like, you know, I had to share that because I was so inspired by what our other guest was saying, you know, and the truth of what she was saying. But yeah, that one time the Hilltop was a revolutionary paper. So anyway, to the question that Jonathan asked me about the march, yes, we're having the Martin Luther King March of Resistance. It's going to take place on Saturday, January 18th, starting at 12 o'clock noon at the Martin Luther King statue, 495 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in Newark. And the march is sponsored by the People's Organization for Progress, but it has been endorsed by 240 organizations, which has never happened before. I mean, we've done this where we've tried to have a march and try to build a coalition around the march. And we've even got like before to 100 plus, but we've never had like 240, 250 endorsers, where this is probably going to end up probably around 250. And, you know, these organizations reflect all walks of life in our community. And I look forward to it. I'm just hoping that the weather will hold. And by the way, we're looking for more endorsers. So if there are any viewers tonight that are part of an organization that would like to endorse, please call the People's Organization for Progress at 973-801-0001 and let us know if you want your group added to the list of endorsers
Can you
for this
repeat that
month.
again? Can you repeat that number?
The
Can you
number
repeat
is,
that number again?
yes, the number is 973-801-0001. And I'm so glad to say that All Politics Are Local is also an endorser on that list of the 238 sponsors, because they got on early. You on the front page of the leaflet there, brothers.
And
You're
what
on
the
the
date is
front page. Every
and is the date of
leaflet
the
is produced, you're gonna be on the front page, huh?
oh, that's excellent. And is the march on the 20th?
Yes, there's a march in Washington, D.C. Let me tell you, there are a bunch of marches happening that weekend.
But the march you're talking about
But
is
right, the march we're talking about is January 18th, which is Saturday, January 18th. But we also plan, and I say plan with the emphasis because we're not really sure if it's going to happen, but we voted to go to the march that Reverend Sharpton is having in Washington, D.C. on the 20th.
okay.
So that's the following Monday after the 18th. I'm hoping that we're going to make it, but we're putting so much energy and effort into the 18th. You know, I can't say with absolute certainty we're going to get to DC, but at least that's the plan for us to march in Newark on the 18th and to march in Washington on the 20th. There are other marches in Washington on the 20th. Sharpton's is not the only march. There are other marches. There are other marches on the 18th, the 19th. You know, people are determined to make their opposition, and this is an important point. It's opposition not just to the Trump administration, because Trump did not start this. The effort to overturn everything that Dr. King and all the other martyrs of the civil rights movement gave their lives for, that started before King was dead.
Right.
King wrote this book, which I always, you know, I'm a fanatic. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? King wrote this book in He wrote it in 66. It was published in 67. He said in 66, and he was good and alive, that the country, this is a quote, the country has already turned its back on the war on poverty and the struggle for desegregation. He says that in this book. He wasn't dead yet, you know, and then because the forces of reaction don't die, you know, they multiply, right? They don't die, you know, they were defeated in terms of the passage of the Civil Rights Act, you know. And another thing, that talking to Mesoma as a journalist, you know, one thing one person might do is go back and take a look at the vote for the Civil Rights Act of 1964. See who voted for it and see who voted against it. You know, because it's all kind of amorphous now. We just say the Civil Rights Act was passed. Yes, it passed narrowly. And the version of the Civil Rights Act that passed was a watered down version. I mean, there's a whole a little piece of research to do to see what the original bill was that was submitted when it was first submitted and what the final bill was that was actually passed. And there were a lot of people, you know, that, you know, were upset, but you know, many of them felt, well, you know, at least we're going to get something passed. But what was actually passed differed from what was initially introduced in Congress. Same thing with the Voting Rights Act. I mean, for instance, here's a little piece, right? People wanted a civil rights law. They did not want an act. There's a difference between an act and a law. An act has to be renewed by Congress. Sometimes it's every 10 years, 20 years, you know. A law is permanent. And the only thing you can do with a law is try to rescind it if you're unhappy with that law. So that's why there was an amendment to the Constitution, you know, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, because they wanted a permanent, you know, a permanent piece of legislation. So I just say these things because I know probably as a journalist, you might be writing about these things. There's always a backstory. You know, there's the story up front, but there's always a backstory that you never see, you know, just like many martyrs that died in the civil rights. I mean, people think Dr. King was the only one that died. Scores of people were killed during the civil rights movement, whose names are hardly ever mentioned. Scores. Something like close to 100 civil rights workers may have been killed between 1955, when the Montgomery bus boycott started, and the passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. Scores, but we never hear their names. I see my brother Rhino on, so I'm going to decrease so that he may increase.
But so let me just repeat this. The march is in Newark on Saturday, right, January 18th. And the number to call for it, like if you want to get involved in it any other way, is 973-801-0001, right?
Right on, right on. We want everybody to come out. We're marching.
Where's it going to be? Where are they marching from?
We're marching from the King Monument, which is basically at the Hall of Records. Everybody probably knows where the Hall of Records is in Newark, on Martin Luther King Boulevard, 495, 465 Martin Luther King Boulevard. We're marching from there. If the weather is bad, we will march to Broad and Market, the intersection of Broad and Market, downtown Newark, and then we'll march back. If the weather is fair, you know, one of those unusual 60-degree days in January, we may march to the Federal Building. But a lot depends on the weather, because we're not trying to get anybody, you know, sick out there, you know. So we're gonna adjust our plans accordingly, and we're marching to honor those that fought and died in the civil rights movement. We're marching to recognize their achievements, and we're marching to oppose ongoing efforts to, in fact, overturn those things which were accomplished, because that's what's going on. You know, can you imagine, here we are in the 21st century and Black teachers are being fired for teaching Black history. Like it's a policy in Florida to ban books about Black people.
Right.
I mean,
Florida,
this
Texas,
is
Iowa.
crazy. Yes,
Right.
this is crazy. This is absolutely insane that Black people are being lynched. We're being lynched today. What was his name? Jordan Neely? That was a lynching.
Right.
When they strangled him to death.
And no
Jordan
crime
Neely.
committed. No crime committed.
No, not on the opposite. Celebrated as a hero.
Yep.
Kyle Rittenhouse shoots and kills protesters. Celebrated as a hero.
Yep.
They took Daniel Penny and brought him to the what game was that? Was the Army Navy game, Ed?
Right.
Was that the football game?
Yep.
Yeah, with Trump. Trump and the vice president.
Celebrate.
Yeah.
You know,
And
it's the policy now. We can kill Black people now with impunity and not face any consequence.
Yeah.
That's what's going on. And it's so normalized that we kind of like, okay, it happened, next. On to the next thing. This is war. There's a war going on. It's a war of low intensity. This is what we used to say about the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. That it was a war of low intensity within South Africa. There's a war against Black people going on right now. And they're in your face. They overturn affirmative action. We already see decline in Black enrollment in colleges and universities. Already, less than a year. Already we see decline. The number of Black law students at Harvard Law School cut 50%. Our children and grandchildren won't be able to benefit from the programs that we benefited from to get us into college.
Right.
I mean, here we are in the 20th century. You know where the United States ranks in the world in education? You would think the richest country in the world is number one. We're 43 in the world in education. But a serious policy being discussed right now is the elimination of the Department of Education.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's crazy. It's like crazy town. You know, it's like Inside Out. You know, but anyway, thank you for letting me come on, talk about the march.
Well, we're going to have to get you back on again, because we want to have a conversation also about like what it means, man. Like I might be asking you the same thing that I asked Gary Bird like darn near 30 years ago, and that's like, I mean, the majority of people voted to put in somebody they knew was a fascist, and a lot of people just don't seem to care. Like they just like, oh, just it is what it is.
Well,
right?
I mean, it's the degree of caring, because 70, let me see, what did Trump get? He got what?
76 million.
76 million. He got 76 million.
Harris
And
got
Kamala got
74
74 million, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
74 million people cared. They cared enough to vote for him. See, you know, 74 million
got more
people
votes
cared.
than Trump did last time.
Who did?
Harris got more votes than Trump did last time. Trump just got more votes.
That's right.
Like people came out.
He got more votes. He won. He won the election. Yes.
Right. No, I mean,
and believe
he
me,
got more votes in 2024 than he did in 2020. Harris got more votes than Trump did in 2020. He just got 2 million more votes than he did 4 years ago.
That's right. That's right. So 74 million people cared. There just wasn't enough of the caring people voting to overpower the people who don't care, who is not even, they don't care. Their program is antithetical to our progress. These people are talking about Musk and Ramaswamy. They want to cut $2 trillion from the federal budget. They're going to cut every social program in the federal government, but they're not going to cut the military budget because that's where Musk's money is. His money from the federal government is in all military contracts. That's how he's making his money. So they're going to try and cut Social Security. See, we talk about the young people should be in the street. The old people are the ones need to be in the street. You can't live off Social Security as it is. They're going to cut Social Security. They're going to cut Medicaid. They're going to cut Medicare. They're going to eliminate the Department of Education. They're talking about eliminating the National Labor Relations Board.
Yep.
They're talking about eliminating the Department of Education. I mean, they're going to put Jonathan, you were talking about white nationalism. Exbeth, the person that's been nominated to head the Pentagon, has white nationalist symbols on his chest.
Yep.
He has the Crusader cross on his chest. That is one of the key symbols of the contemporary neo-Nazi white nationalist movement. He was such a threat. He was such an extremist that the security services would not let him attend Biden's inauguration in 2020.
Wow.
So it's a serious situation. But look, Rhino is here. I got to get out the way.
Can I ask a question?
Yo, Larry, get out the way.
But one last question, Masoma.
Okay. So have you been
Go
seeing the conversation with Musk talking about the F1 visa advocate, like him advocating for more funding? So what are your thoughts on like him saying that we should deport immigrants and like illegal immigrants and stop like the birthright citizenship, but wanting to keep funding for F1 visas?
Well, it shows you what a sham his position is. Like, they campaign on racial hatred because you got to understand that the anti-immigrant thing is an anti-racial thing. It's anti everybody of color. And the easy target right now are people who are undocumented. But believe me when I tell you, that fire is not just for the undocumented immigrants in this country. So a fight has broke out. They've been literally calling this a civil war in the MAGA camp. That is the Musk faction versus the base, like Steve Bannon and Miller, who you mentioned earlier, Jonathan. They're against this immigration. They're against these HB1 visas. But Musk wants these HB1 visas, one, because it's a pool of skilled labor that he needs to produce his industries, and two, he can pay them less than he would pay American workers with the same skills. So it's already the contradictions, because everything has contradictions. They were all hugged up, but this fight broke out this weekend. Well, this past week, you know, you had Steve Bannon in the newspapers talking about, no, we're against all of this HB1 visas and all this other stuff. We're against that. But Musk needs that because he can pay them people less than he would pay American workers with comparable skills. So it's all a sham. I mean, just like with immigration, they want to go and arrest the undocumented people. How come they're not going to arrest the business owners who have been hiring these people and providing the jobs for which they're coming across the border for? Because that's why they're coming. They coming because they know there's some work for them. And all these businesses hire those folks, but they pay no penalties. They're getting ready to set up concentration camps. This is what this is. Let's call it for what it is. They're going to set up concentration camps to put undocumented people in, allegedly to deport them. We'll see how much deporting actually goes on. But they're setting up camps, right? Camps and prisons right now. And as Jonathan said earlier, this is a very important point. This whole infrastructure that they're putting together to deal with the so-called immigration problem, they're going to use that against us. They're going to use it. Look, right now, Trump is suing. He sued ABC because ABC was critical of him. And ABC punked out and settled. I think it was for how much was it for? Was it for 13 million? I think it was 13 million was the settlement. Now Musk is talking about suing newspapers that criticize him. So they want to shut down all opposition because they know a lot of these newspapers, even some of the ones that, you know, are fairly what they call legacy news, but they ain't got a lot of money to be fighting these court battles. And this should concern you, Ms. Soma, as a journalist, because they want to shape people's perception of reality. They want to muzzle the press. They don't want any investigative reporting. They don't want any muckraking journalists. They don't want anybody that's going to point out the hypocrisy and the contradictions. No, they don't want that. They want people who are going to write stories that they like. And you know, I was so moved. What was the sister's name that was on his Thandisizwe? Was that her name? The sister that was on, Jonathan.
Oh, her name is, I want to get it right. Thandisizwe Chimurenga.
Right. Did you see she started crying? She started crying. She's been, as a journalist, she's been following this stuff so closely. And she knows the story so comprehensively that for her to talk about it becomes an emotional, traumatic experience. For somebody to break down and start crying. Because more journalists have been killed by the Israelis in Gaza than anywhere else in the world and maybe in history. They have purposefully targeted journalists because they don't want the truth to come out. And see, here's the other part of this. The same way that they relate to Gaza and Israel, they're going to relate to Black people like that. What's the difference between a news story where they say something like, children died in Gaza today. That's the headline, right? They don't say Israel killed 36 children in Gaza. That's not the headline. The headline is just children died in Gaza. What children? Who killed the children? And the same thing is like Penny. They use the word Penny restrained Norton. He strangled him to death. What are you talking about? He restrained him. He strangled him to death.
Right.
So, you know, and all of it, I'm sorry, I'll stop. Rhino, it's not my fault.
Fair enough.
I'm trying to get out of here.
It's the fault of the world, man. It's the world we're living in, man.
That's true.
Crazy. It's crazy right
now. You know,
all right, Rhino. No, I was gonna say, Larry, you know, we're gonna have you back a lot because we need to, more now than ever, right? And stick around for the Rhino segment because they know we always love to have you for that too.
My man.
So Rhino, man, what's up? What's going on?
What's good, man? I mean, I'm not going to keep us too long. I know we pretty much passed the time. I just wanted, because I know I was supposed to be here last week, and I was so caught up in family and running around with chauffeuring my daughter and hair appointments and all of that stuff. So I couldn't, we were celebrating Kwanzaa and all, so I couldn't get on like I wanted to. But I wanted to just close out the year. I wanted to just say, rest in peace, all of the people we lost in hip hop. Mr. C, Fat Man Scoop, DJ Polo, TJ Swan, Saphir, DJ Clark Kent, and so many more, man. We lost, we lost a few this year in hip hop. But I also wanted to end off on a good note and big ups, and just give a big ups to a lot of our OGs, man. The ones, some of our OG rappers that came out in the late '80s and throughout the '90s, man. And there's a lot of them that came out this past year and dropped like some serious projects, man. That really, made a lot of people proud, man. A lot of folks of my generation proud. LL Cool J, of course. With the Force album produced by Q-Tip. Common and Pete Rock, the
Yeah, I love that
Auditorium
album.
Part 1. That was huge. Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre with Missionary. That album was pretty good. If y'all haven't heard it yet, definitely check it out, man. They got some bangers on there, man, that I love. Redman just dropped a new album, Money Waters 2, which a lot of us out here in Newark, we've been in Brick City, we've been banging his album since it dropped. He dropped it on Christmas Eve, and that's pretty much what we all been playing since. So shout out to Redman and Muddy Waters 2. MC Light put her One of One out this year. Ice Cube, Man Down. Eminem put one out. Fat Joe, Craig G, Just Ice and Mantronics. It was a whole bunch of albums that came out from from our legendary artists, man, and a lot of them were solid projects. Rakim was another one that put one out. So I just wanted to shout out the OGs, man, and like I said, they showing and proving that it could be done. These we talking about people that's in their mid 50s and stuff. You know what I mean? Like LL's in his going into his late 50s, and his album was like one of the top albums of the year.
Wow.
So it's really about just stick to your craft, stick to what you do, believe in yourself, and just do it, man. Don't listen to all because for years we've heard, oh, you washed up when you get to a certain age, this, that, and the other. But but over the recent years, it was the OGs that was really showing and proving that we got it, man. We still got it. We come from a special time and place in hip hop, and we don't lose that energy. That energy is still there. You know what I mean? So big ups to
Do you
all
think
the
they were
OGs.
inspired a lot by Nas? Because Nas
Say it
has been
again.
releasing. Do you think they
Oh,
were
not and
inspired
Nas.
by
Yeah,
Nas?
I mean Nas been
He's
releasing
been
stuff.
releasing classics every year
Yeah,
since 2020.
yeah, definitely. Nas is definitely, and he's another one that's advocating just like LL, man. To just telling all of the OG artists, man, keep doing it. Don't stop doing it because you think you're washed up or you're old or keep doing it, man. This is what's keeping us alive. And then we're the ones who have those, we came through the conscious era of hip hop, so we know what that was, you know what I'm saying? So we can do that again. We can try to push those positive messages again in hip hop, you know what I mean? To show the younger artists how to do it. And also I want to shout out Kendrick for putting out his GNX and just doing what he did all year, this past year. And then I also want to salute the new artist Doechii, who's making a lot
Yes,
of noise. Yeah, Doechii's making a lot of noise right now. So if you haven't checked her out, definitely check her out.
I love that
She's
album.
very talented. You check out her Tiny Desk on YouTube. You can see that also. Where she's very creative. She got messages, and she tells her story. You know what I mean? And
I love
yeah,
the
I got a
I
lot of
love what she
respect for
did
Doechii.
with Issa Rae. She did
Yeah,
a
with
she
Issa
she
Rae, that was
redid one
good
of her
too.
songs that,
Yeah,
oh man, that was like just tough.
yeah, definitely. Also, Rhapsody was another one that put one out this past year. There's been a lot of great albums, man. We just gotta
Rhapsody
we
was
gotta put them on the
amazing.
radar.
Yeah,
Say it
Rhapsody
again.
was amazing.
Yeah,
Rhapsody was
Rhapsody's
amazing as
album
well.
was really
Loved
good.
Rhapsody.
Yeah,
I,
it was
that
really
her
good.
album that she released this year was my favorite.
Yeah, yeah. So that's all I wanted to get into. It wasn't a whole lot. I just wanted to shout out some folks for the year that we just finished up, and just say happy New Year and happy 2025. Let's keep it moving. Let's keep it strong. Let's get strong. Let's get unified, and let's stay focused.
And I can't wait till the conversations we're gonna have about hip hop, because I think that there's, when it comes to aesthetics, right? Like I was listening to Lupe Fiasco released an album a couple of years back, and it was, you know, a commentary on drill music, right? And and not just a comment on drill music, but a commentary on like materialism, the way in which like people have been using the craft and using hip hop, right? And I think that that's going to be coming more into play the worse stuff gets, because the thing about hip hop that, and we definitely need to have this as a longer conversation, but the thing about hip hop that to me makes hip hop, and the reason why it just speaks to me and so many others, is that it is naturally, it has a natural aesthetic that pushes back against white supremacy at its, not even at its best, but at its medium, right? And I think most forms of hip hop question, interrogate, push back against levels of white supremacy. And then I think that there's a conversation, and to some extent, I think that the underlying conversation and tension between, and you didn't mention in the year end, but between Drake and Kendrick was a commentary on what is the purpose of hip hop. Is there hip hop that is reinforcing the standard aesthetic white European worldview, or one that is about questioning and interrogating like it at an aesthetic level, right? Like that is unapologetically black in a way that acknowledges it, or one that just seems to appease, right? Like I think some of the reasons why, no matter what you think about the beef, I think some of the reasons why we reacted to the beef in the way that we reacted to the beef is because we kind of felt that, you know, and maybe it's just the brothers who think too much, right? We kind of felt that the beef was one that like Kendrick Lamar was actually insulted because he's like, no, you're not like us, as in the way in which you think about the world is one that reinforces, reifies like a certain level of white oppression, self-hatred, like the things that are bad about black people, the things that are bad in the world, that is you. The things that we want to be revolutionary in terms of questioning the way the world is structured, that is me. You not me. You not us. Right? And that's what I felt was that powerful underlying. And don't get me wrong, I like Drake sometimes, right? But I don't think, but I think that the beef was about something that was underlying it. So
Yeah,
I'm
definitely a
I'm
lot
gonna look
deeper.
forward to these conversations. You were
Definitely.
saying?
And we got to come back next time and, you know, talk about this thing with FBA and what FBA means, and how Fat Joe misspoke and said some things that got himself in trouble.
Mm.
He got himself in some trouble. But we'll talk about that
I,
next time.
yeah, let's talk about it next time. But I didn't hear about that, so I got to look that up.
Yeah, yeah,
I didn't even hear about Fat Joe having a controversy.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
He's been going through it, man. He's been going through it. He said some things that were out of line, and yeah, they coming for him.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think we might be feeling some kind of way. Although them Latinos voted for Trump, I think maybe, I don't know what he said, but maybe he might have been like, "Are you like us, Fat Joe? We're giving a lot of people passes that might not be getting passes. They're gonna get some side looks, right? They're gonna be like, it's gonna be like when J Lo used the N word, and people were like, J Lo, you're not that kind of Latino.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
just not, right?
yeah.
You a Ben Affleck kind of Latino. You're not, you're not a, you know,
Yeah.
you're not a Cardi B
Yeah.
Latina. You're not.
Right.
There's Cardi B. There's J Lo. You might not be able to say what you think you
Certain
might need
things.
to
Yeah.
say because
Mhm.
nah. You might have voted for Trump. We don't know. Right? We don't know. You might be one of them. All right, so we look forward to that conversation, right? Like I gotta look up
Definitely.
what happened with Fat Joe, but we'll
Yeah,
talk
look it
about
up, man.
it
It's
next week.
very interesting. And there's a lot out there to look into.
All right, and so thank you. I know we are way past time. We are 13 minutes over. Uh,
Jonathan,
Larry, yeah,
Jonathan, your sister and I are doing a book signing on February 1st at
okay,
the Source of Knowledge bookstore on Broad Street, February 1st at 12 noon. She's flying up from Georgia for this. And so we hope everybody will come. It's going to be more than a book signing, though. We're asking the people who have purchased the book to come so that we can have a discussion about what people read and what questions they have or what
oh,
things,
excellent.
yes, what things they may have disagreed with. It's going to be a discussion. It's going to be like part 2 to the book signing we had at the library where people couldn't ask questions, because of whatever reason. But that'll be February 1st, Saturday, February 1st, 12 noon at Source of Knowledge bookstore on Broad Street in Newark. Everybody come out. It's free. You can come, and it's the first day of Black History Month. So come buy some Black books at Source of Knowledge.
Excellent, excellent. We're gonna have you and my sister on the show before that happens because we need to promote that. Annette Alston, amazing writer, and amazing book, and like source of knowledge. February 1st, first day of Black History Month. Like, come on, there's nothing better than that. What are you doing the first day of Black History Month? You better be at the source of knowledge because there's no better place to be on February 1st. That's what I'm saying.
All right.
All right. So thank you. Any other announcements? Ed, Masoma, Rhino.
No. Let's just thank our
Yeah.
guests. Just want to thank everybody for being on.
All right. Yes. So thank you. Thank everybody for being on tonight. Big thank you to LaKeesha Eure for just educating us again, as she does every time that she is on this show. Deputy Mayor, about all of the work that is being done on violence prevention and the layers there are to it. I recommend that anyone who didn't miss that segment go back and see it. Also, thank you to Thandisizwe, uh, Chimurenga, amazing writer and independent journalist who just floored us again, right? Who will have to have back. Thank you, Chairman Larry Ham, for being on. A shout out to Josie Gonsalves, who couldn't be on tonight, and a shout out also to Dr. Kelly Harris, also who could not make it tonight for things that they are doing. So shout out in our prayers, all that other stuff. Thank you so much, Chairman Ham, and we will have to have you back. No, we have one more. We have one more.
Real quick.
All right, Chairman Ham, what's up?
You said Dr. Kelly Harris, and it triggered. We're going to have a teach-in prior to the march. It's going to be next Saturday, January 11th, 1:00 p.m. at Bethany Baptist Church, 275 West Market Street in Newark. It's going to be a teach-in on Dr. King and the coming struggle for justice in 2025. And Dr. Kelly Harris will be one speaker. Stephanie Harris from Seton Hall University will be another speaker, and there'll be also other people on the panel, including myself.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and until next week. Until next week, be careful and be safe.
Peace.
All right, someone, great job. Great job tonight. Thank you
All
so
right,
much
great.
for the whole show. We appreciate it.
Yep. And I think we're still on. So I'm going to try to end the stream.